Chapter 94. When Su Xinxing returned to his lodgings, blossoming courtyard Yuan was naturally not at home. After all, it was still class time in Phoenix Academy. Summoning his spirit ghosts to pass through the door, and after opening the door from the inside, Su Xinxing then slowly entered the house. Although compared to yesterday's horrifying scene, after Su Xinxing's torment in the middle of the night, the house had already become much better. It was probably to the extent of being slightly messy, and even if he opened the windows, he wouldn't need to worry about a large number of flies invading. But this tranquility was only on the surface. The real horror has yet to begin. Su Xinxing took a deep breath as he and the other spirit ghosts looked at the door, which had been sealed till now as though they were facing a great enemy. The frosted glass had isolated the world behind the sliding door, but he could faintly catch a glimpse of some wriggling ominous things. The kitchen was always a place where soldiers would fight for when they were cleaning. After mentally preparing himself, he ignored the talismans on the sliding door and pulled open that forbidden door. In an instant, a foul stench that could be seen with the naked eye gushed out from the kitchen like a flood. The stench of rotting meat mixed with the smell of rotten fruits and vegetables, the lush green scene in the sink which had to be mosaicked before it could be shown on the screen, and the bento boxes which had overflowed from the rubbish bin, most of them were pasted with half-price stickers and laurel crowns, were all telling how terrifying this small room was. Even the spirit ghosts who had their noses cut off before they died, which resulted in them having almost no sense of smell after death, subconsciously covered their noses and mouths when they saw this horrible scene. And Su Xinxing, who bore the brunt of that foul stench for the first time, had the illusion that his cloud scale was on the verge of collapsing. Not knowing if it was a psychological effect, he somehow felt that the kitchen seemed to be filled with a light green fog, just like the green miasma which filled the Death Swamp when he passed through Syra Swamp that year. The only difference was that the Death Swamp at least had dead swamp fishmen, wild-toothed giant crocodiles, and other creatures which were immune to the poison of the miasma. But there was not a single living thing in this room. Su Xinxing even found the corpses of cockroaches in the mysterious black liquid in some lunchboxes. Even cockroaches that had lived on Earth since the Devonian period and had a longer history than the dinosaurs and were able to adapt to all kinds of harsh environments had no choice but to die here. Su Xinxing began to have difficulty breathing. Of course, it was just an illusion. He had been able to survive in an oxygen-free environment for a long time. This is not good. If this mysterious poisonous gas is released, it might cause a disaster even greater than the mustard gas. Looking at the hazy green mist slowly drifting from the kitchen to the living room, Su Xinxing suddenly came back to his senses. What he didn't know was that when this mysterious gas spread out from the kitchen, the animals in the surrounding area also showed signs of abnormality. The dogs began to bark madly. Some of them were crazily crawling on the ground. Even more of them were running around madly. The cats were slightly more elegant. They just showed a sense of uneasiness. Many cats abandoned their poop pickers and ran up to the trees with their kittens in their mouths. The birds seemed to be frightened by something. They began to hover in the sky but no longer landed on the ground. The ants began to move, and even the cockroaches crawled out from every corner, scaring many people. Some experienced old people suddenly turned pale. Their fingers trembled as they pointed to the sea where countless fish jumped out of the water and said in shock, This is the sign of a natural disaster." Even the investigators of Yinyang Liao noticed this unusual situation and couldn't help but nervously ask for help from the headquarters. Su Xinxing, the initiator of all this, was unaware. He just stuck the talismans he got from Xingyan Ameng around the kitchen door, barely stopping the spread of the stench. However, under the influence of the stench, the talismans began to wither not long after. He didn't know how long they could last. Before the talismans are destroyed, the kitchen must be cleaned up successfully. The sense of urgency that Su Xinxing missed hit him. Ever since he raced against time to defeat the Demon King before the Demon King's army completely destroyed the Demon King's army, he hadn't experienced such a sense of urgency for a long time. Little air, throw all the bento boxes into the garbage bag and throw them away. Little sea, I'll leave the sink to you. Little woo, wipe the kitchen counter. Su Xinxing skillfully assigned the tasks. By the way, little E, little Air, little San, little C, little Wu, and little Wu were the names that Su Shenxing gave the spirit ghosts. However, this guy was a little lazy. He just named them according to the age of the little guys when they were alive, and then gave them a homophonic name of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The spirit ghosts could only carry out Su Shenxing's instructions with bitter faces. Su Shenxing began to clean the kitchen counter. Although it hadn't been used much, the mold that had spread from the sink had almost taken over the place. It looked green and rather creepy. With the efforts of the crowd, spirit, the kitchen gradually returned to its original appearance. When Blossom Courtyard returned home, she opened the door and saw such a bustling scene. She froze at the door for a moment. The young girl planned to pretend that she didn't see anything and retreated outside to pass the time. However, before she could escape, she was caught red-handed by Su Shenxing, who was waiting for her. "Don't run. Go and throw away all the garbage bags at the door. I've already put up the recyclable and non-recyclable labels. Don't throw them away wrongly." Where did this old woman come from? Yuan rolled her eyes and put the book in her hand on the shoe cabinet at the entrance. Then she grabbed the garbage bag at the door with both hands and lifted it up. As a result, the weight of the garbage bag exceeded her expectations. The young girl staggered and bumped into the shoe cabinet. The book fell to the ground and the letter inside also fluttered down like a feather. Before she could react, the spirit ghost next to her cleverly caught the letter and respectfully presented it to Su Shenxing, who was wearing rubber gloves. "What? New mission, to be a bodyguard for the museum's exhibition?" Su Shenxing looked at the words on the letter and couldn't help but narrow his eyes. He revealed a very dangerous smile in Yuan's eyes. This guy just had to see it. The young girl couldn't help but curse her bad luck in her heart. "Let me see. If there's time, shouldn't the exhibition start today? It just so happens that the house is almost cleaned up. Let's go take a look at the exhibition." "Ah, I'll have to trouble you to pay for my ticket. How thick-skinned is this guy?" Chapter 95. The location of the exhibition was the public museum in the city. Originally, it was just a small place without many people, but the gimmick of the national treasure was quite powerful. When Su Shenxing and the others arrived, there was already a sea of people. "By the way, is it really okay for you to come so late?" While being pushed around in the crowd, Su Shenxing asked Hanakeyuan Yuan, who was next to him, "I think in such a chaotic situation, things are most likely to be stolen, right? Perhaps for ordinary people, in public meant that they had no chance to steal." However, Su Shenxing had experienced so many supernatural events that he had long known that ordinary people's common sense was useless against supernatural beings. Putting everything else aside, Su Shenxing alone had at least 3 ways to take away the exhibits in front of everyone. "There's a Shikigami here, it's okay." Hanakeyuan Yuan's face was expressionless as she muttered in a voice that was difficult to hear clearly in the crowd. In fact, she had long planned to take advantage of the chaos to get rid of Su Shenxing. However, for some reason, even if she escaped by moving around in the crowd and using other people to block Su Shenxing's sight, after a while, Su Shenxing would be pushed to her side by the crowd again. After several failed attempts to escape, the girl seemed to have accepted her fate and was pushed around by the crowd with Su Shenxing as if she had accepted her fate. After lining up for a while, the 2 people, plus 6 spirit ghosts, finally bought tickets and successfully entered the museum. "By the way, you are the security guard of the exhibition. Don't you have a work permit or something to let us in directly?" The people in the museum finally seemed to be less than outside, and they could move freely. Su Shenxing wiped the sweat on his head and took the time to ask. "No," the girl answered crisply. After all, Enyang Liao was not an organization that could be put on the table. In the secular world, an exhibition of this scale naturally had special security companies and self-defense forces to protect it. If Enyang Liao sent a team of several first-line Enyang masters, they could still use conventional means to disguise themselves as ordinary security guards. They usually did. However, there was no way to fool a guy like Hanakeyuan Yuan, who was obviously underage, so they could only try their best to protect her as an amateur. This was also one of the reasons why Yu Yuan felt that this mission was somewhat strange. Oh, there's even a Kappa's corpse. Is this real? Not long after, Su Xinxing began to wander around, looking at the various exhibits of the exhibition with great interest. The Kappa mummy from the Rilongji Temple in Osaka. It's real. As an industry insider, Blossom Courtyard Yu Yuan naturally dabbled in some strange things. But it was precisely because of this that she felt even more strange. The monks of Reilong Temple should have prohibited visitors from seeing the Kappa mummy. Yet they had displayed it in this exhibition. It was just like how the Kyoto Public Museum would display the national treasure, Tokugawa Yasutsuna. It was too abnormal. Not only that, but in this exhibition hall alone, the girl could recognize 7 or 8 products from the inner world. In addition to the Kappa mummy and the Osaka Rilongji's collection of the mermaid corpse, there is also the Anamaru Kakuzuna that should have been hidden in the inner hall of the Fusang Palace. For an exhibition, this number was too abnormal. It should be known that even in that kind of large museum, there were often only 1 or 2 items related to supernatural existence or power in a hall. Suddenly, Su Xinxing hugged Blossom Courtyard Yu Yuan intimately like a couple, startling the girl who was still immersed in her own thoughts. This guy didn't have any breath, and she accidentally forgot that he was still by her side. Just as the girl was about to struggle up, Su Xinxing whispered in her ear, "There's a strange guy watching from the right rear." Yu Yuan was startled and quietly connected to the vision of the Shikigami she left in the exhibition hall. Sure enough, she saw a strange person in the direction Su Xinxing pointed out. The other party should be a man. It was summer, but the man was wearing long sleeves and knee-length jeans. He even had a cap on his head. Rather than saying that his face was expressionless, it was more accurate to say that he was wearing an expressionless human skin mask. His hands were hanging low, and the few exposed skin had a strange bulging feeling, as if he was wearing clothes that were 1 size smaller. As if aware that he had been discovered, the other party lowered his cap and limped away. The other party's action was exactly what they wanted, and the two hurriedly followed. After all, there were too many people in the museum. Even if Su Xinxing wanted to make a move, he had to estimate the degree of impact it would cause. As for the premise of making a move at the beginning, the reason was very simple. Su Xinxing was the kind of person who liked to use his hands more than his brain. In his words, as long as he added the word physical behind the action, he could almost solve most of the situations. And he had been using his own actions to explain this sentence. In a sense, Blossom Courtyard Yu Yuan was the same kind of person as Su Xinxing. Although she always quietly read books at school and acted like a literary girl, in fact, she preferred to make a move instead of shooting her mouth off. This could be seen from the fact that she didn't know Mo Li's strength and background before making a move against the devil Loli. As a result, she was almost beaten to the ground by Mo Li. However, when the two chased out of the museum, they found that the sea of people outside blocked their vision. Even if they continued to track with the help of the ghost spirit and the spirit Shikigami, they still lost track of that person when they came to the main road outside. It was as if the other party had suddenly disappeared. What do you think? Su Xinxing walked to the side of the road, looked to the side, and asked with a frown. Very suspicious. Blossom Courtyard Yu Yuan answered concisely. Rather than saying very suspicious, it was better to say that the suspicious aura was off the charts, okay? That guy was as obvious as the insect in Men in Black one. From the outside, he kept emitting an aura that said, "Come and check on me, I'm actually not human." If it was cis, even if the police there directly shot him and said that this guy was threatening them, they would be acquitted without going to court. No, I'm asking you how you like to eat this for dinner. Su Xinxing pointed to the long stick-like object in front of him that was full of small lumps and exuded a strange smell. It's for clearing heat and detoxifying? I refuse. Yu Yuan changed back to her previous expressionless face and answered without hesitation, also, please don't look at Bittergourd with an ulterior motive, thank you. I'm telling you, only people whose brains are full of filthy things will think that everything they see is filthy. Wait, I'm joking, don't go, I don't know the way, don't leave me. Chapter 96. Although they successfully found a suspicious person last night, in a sense, The mission had a certain degree of breakthrough, but Hanakeyuan Yuyuan was not happy at all. Any girl who woke up in the morning and saw an uncle with a face full of stubble picking up her underwear would not be happy, right? Listen to me, in fact, everything originated from a beautiful misunderstanding. Su Xinxing carefully explained while scooping rice. The low pressure that lingered around the girl's body made him a little scared. After all, this matter was indeed his fault. He was muddle-headed from his sleep in the morning and thought that he was in Sakura Apartments. He subconsciously helped Jasmine pack her clothes as usual. As a result, he was awakened by a scream that almost broke his eardrum. Then Yuan became like this. I am allergic to perverts. Please stay more than 20 meters away from me, thank you. Then I can only sit on the balcony? Hearing Su Xinxing's words, Yuan thought for a moment, then stood up, walked a few steps to the balcony, and sat down again. You don't even let me sit on the balcony. Su Xinxing shed tears of regret for his hand in the morning. Breakfast was dry roasted bamboo fish, miso soup, and rice. Although it was not the same as the breakfast habits of the Chinese people, for Su Xinxing, who usually had difficulty even eating porridge for breakfast, to be able to eat rice in the morning was already something to be grateful for. By the way, although he was allergic to seafood, he would only have a reaction when eating sea urchins, abalone, and so on. Ordinary sea fish were not a problem. As for those allergens, with his current financial situation, it would be very difficult to come into contact with them in this lifetime. Do you want natto? Su Xinxing took out a small box and asked the girl. The girl did not answer, she just quietly ate her breakfast, obviously still angry. There is rice on the side of your mouth? Su Xinxing put down the natto box, pointed to the corner of his mouth and signaled to the girl. Yuan stuck the rice in her mouth with her finger, still did not speak to him. How was the breakfast? Su Xinxing continued to ask, not discouraged. Although he had never made bamboo fish miso soup before, it was basically the same as cooking. For people who were more familiar with this aspect, they could make a home-cooked delicacy with just a little bit of practice as long as they got used to it. It was delicious. After a long while, the young girl muttered unwillingly. Compared to the past where they either skipped breakfast or bought rice balls from the convenience store on the road, today's breakfast was indeed very delicious. Most importantly, it was the homely taste that was hard to find in a family restaurant. Ever since the decline of the Hua Kaiyuan family, she had hardly tasted this kind of flavor. Therefore, Su Xinxing showed a happy smile. I still haven't forgiven you. The girl looked at his smiling face and gritted her teeth. Okay, does our security lady need more food? Another bowl. The breakfast time of Hua Kaiyuan's temporary family passed peacefully. Dividing line. Although there was a new mission, but the original instruction to go to Huanghua Academy had not been lifted, so Yuyuan still had to go to school on time. During lunch break, she also appeared at the back of the White Bell Shrine and became part of Su Xinxing's group. Hua Kaiyuan classmate is also here. Chihaya Fukuyama did not know why, but in front of Hua Kaiyuan, he felt that his hands and feet were tied. I just want to find a quiet place to eat my lunch. Taking out the lunch prepared by Su Xinxing, the young girl clasped her hands together and softly said, I'm starting to eat, and opened the lunch box. The dishes were not particularly luxurious and the color could even be said to be a little plain. But the combination of meat and vegetables was great, and with the addition of Japanese-style omelette as embellishments, this handmade lunch could be considered to be very good. But before Yuyuan started eating, she found that Emoli had put down the scallops, thin salt-flavored, in his hands and was drooling while staring at her lunchbox. Octopus sausage, do you want to eat? Yuyuan used her chopsticks to pick up a Vienna sausage carved into the shape of an octopus and asked softly. Emoli hurriedly nodded his head and then took a bite of the sausage on his chopsticks and chewed with a blissful expression. She didn't know why, but Yuyuan, who had suffered a huge loss the day before yesterday, was clearly still a little afraid of Jasmine until this morning. But now, she didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. She only felt that the way Jasmine ate was very cute. By the way, Chihaya had also prepared a lunchbox for Emoli, but Emoli had secretly eaten the entire lunchbox in the morning during class. Sorry to disturb you. Asahi Sakurakanji came over and took out a thermos flask. I brought some wheat tea here, Hua Kaiyuan classmate, do you want some? If it was any other time, Yuan felt that she would definitely reject, but now she couldn't help but nod her head and then received the cup of wheat tea, which was placed in a disposable paper cup, and took a light sip. It's delicious. Hua Kaiyuan classmate, I'm glad you like it. Asahi Sakurakanji replied to Yuan with a feminine smile. Too bad she's a fujoshi. Su Shinshing, who was watching not far away, sighed in his heart. What did you do to Hua Kaiyuan? Why do I feel like she's completely different from yesterday? Until now, Qian Zhao, who was still trying to control the divine position with the help of Su Shinshing, sat side by side with him. She couldn't help but ask as she opened her lunchbox. Su Shinshing winked at him. Oh, is that so? Qian Zhao, who felt fine no matter what, replied without a care in the world and began to eat her lunchbox. You gave up too quickly. Why don't you ask me more questions? My heart hurts so much. Su Shinshing, who was ignored, immediately twisted his body and kept whispering in Qian Zhao's ear like a fly. Chihaya showed a wow, this guy is so troublesome expression and finally sighed helplessly. Then what happened? Huff huff, listen to me, actually Hua Kaiyuan girl has already bowed down to my Hawaiian beach pants? Before Su Shinshing could finish his words, the lid of the lunchbox flew over and hit him on the ground. Although it didn't break his defense, he still pretended to be in pain and stretched out a trembling hand towards the sky with an "I have no regrets in my life" expression. Why can't you be more serious? Is it fun to be like this all the time? Chihaya couldn't help but sigh again. It's super fun. Su Shinshing replied energetically. This guy is hopeless. At this moment, Chihaya Fukuyama and Hua Kaiyuan's thoughts were synchronized. Chapter 97. The Yin-Yang Shirtao was a supernatural monitoring organization that had been passed down from the Heian era. It was undoubtedly the highest authority in the inner world of Fuso. Unlike Huaxia, which cultivated the new generation of practitioners through sects, Fuso emphasized on the theory of bloodline. Most practitioners were descendants of the Yin-Yang master family. These people generally had innate spiritual power in their bodies. They were much faster than the practitioners of Huaxia who practiced in the winter and summer. However, this kind of accelerated cultivation method that only knew how to tap into the potential of the bloodline also limited the development of the practitioners of Fuso. Since the beginning of the Heian era, the only famous Yin-Yang master in Fuso was Abe Saimai. However, it was precisely because of this that the Yin-Yang Shirtao was able to categorize the Yin-Yang Shirtao as a discipline system. It used the most simple and easy-to-understand method to cultivate groups of practitioners like modern schools. In terms of low-level practitioners, the number of Yin-Yang masters in Fuso even exceeded that of Huaxia, which mainly recruited practitioners from sections. Of course, in terms of high-end combat power, the mainland was still superior. At this time, in the headquarters of the Yin-Yang Shirtao located in the capital, a man wearing a patterned feather cloak was walking down a wooden corridor with a gloomy expression. The other Yin-Yang masters who passed by did not dare to provoke him. They all lowered their heads and avoided the violent master of the Yin-Yang Shirtao. Finally, he came to the office where Dr. Quan of the Yin-Yang Shirtao was. Excuse me. His deep voice and indescribable gloominess were enough to make the other Yin-Yang masters worry about the safety of their superior in the office. As soon as the man opened the paper door, a young man wearing a black and white hunting suit narrowed his fox-like eyes. He held a bat fan in his hand and showed an uncomfortable fake smile. Oh, isn't this the ace of the Yin-Yang Shirtao, Lord Minamoto Shirtao? I remember that you should be attending the religious conference in the Vatican as a representative of Fuso Shinto. Why you here? I'm afraid that if I continue to stay in the Vatican, you'll give away Fuso's national treasures one by one to those demons and monsters. In the face of the young man's fake smile, Minamoto Shirgen seemed to be used to it as he mocked without batting an eyelid. I heard that the group of trash guarding the god on Rock Palace even lost Mikazuki Munakika and Fudo Mitama? Minami-kun, your information is outdated. Tsunetsugu Juzumaru from Hanshoji Temple and Tingyun from Rita Shrine have also been stolen. The Maeda Yadakukai has also recently discovered traces of an unknown person's invasion. I estimate that the target is the Emperor of Named Object Ceremony. Facing the Emperor's accusation, everyone in the shoujo is panicking. So you let people throw the remaining Anamaru Kokatsuna and Dojijiri Yasutsuna of the 5 swords of the world to that small county, and also sent those useless people to guard it and let people steal it. Because no matter what, I can't use the remaining heavenly feather slash as bait. His Majesty will kill me. The Maeda Yadakukai was also scared and refused to take out the Emperor of Named Object Ceremony as bait. The fox-eyed young man didn't seem to hear the sarcasm in Minamoto Shurgen's words. Instead, he used the bat fan to support his chin and said with a smile, "And that thief is much more cunning than I imagined. If there are too many guards, they won't be able to find its trace at all." In fact, this was also the case. The heavily guarded god on Rock Palace and Rita Shrine had their treasures stolen without anyone noticing. On the contrary, the Maeda Yadakukai, which was not so heavily guarded, noticed the traces before the other party took action. It was precisely because of this that the highest Inyang head of the Inyang shoujo would take the risk of throwing Dojijiri Yasutsuna and Anamaru Kokatsuna as bait. And it's not like I didn't consider anything, except for some necessary backup plans. Seeing the unhappy look on Minamoto Shurgen's face, he continued, "This time I entrusted it to the orphan of the Hanaquin family. Humph, that little brat with impure blood. I don't think a guy like her can stop a thief that even a first-class Inyang master can't detect." At the mention of the name Hanaquin, Minamoto Shurgen's eyes were full of contempt. It's better to say that as long as she doesn't betray us humans like her dead father, it's good enough. You actually trusted that little brat. When did you become so soft-hearted, Tsuchimikado Motoki? Don't say that, Yoyuo-kun. Let's not talk about the development of Yoyuo-kun for the time being. Both men and women in Japan can use the honorific title of Kurin, is very hardworking. In terms of performance, maybe even you, the ace, can't compare to her. Known as Tsuchimikado Motoki, the current head of the Tsuchimikado family smiled slightly. In order to revive the Hanaquin family, she is working very hard. I hope so. Minamoto Shurgen turned around and walked out of the door. Is Yoyuo-kun also planning to go to the White Bell County? Tsuchimikado Motoki put away his bat fan, looked at the burly figure that could almost cover half of the paper door, and asked loudly. Of course, isn't it? Unlike an old fox like you, I can't just leave that little brat there. I can't be at ease. If that's the case, then send my regards to the head of the imperial concubine family. He will also be heading to Hackering City in the next few days. Oh, right, as compensation, I'll give you a little advice. Tsuchimikado Motoki didn't mind the disrespect in the other's words, and just continued with a smile. Absolutely do not provoke the god of that place. A god that descended to the human world in this era. Minamoto Shurgen snorted lightly. Although he didn't finish his words, everyone could hear the disdain in his voice. Then, without any reluctance, he slammed the door shut and quickly left the place. Only Tsuchimikado Motoki was left in the room. The smile on the face of the current Inyang head of the Inyang Liao gradually faded, and it was replaced by a thoughtful expression. It's common sense that the power of the gods of this era would be weakened in this world, but if we believe in common sense too much, we will only be digging our own graves in the inner world we live in. Even Tsuchimikado Motoki couldn't figure out the true strength of the god that came from the other side of the strait. The report from Huaxia's super-administrator's office only recorded a few words of no practical significance. Apart from the fact that the god was considered an Einherjar, there wasn't even a complete name of the god. The god's behavior in Hackering City could be said to be mysterious. In just half a day, the Inyang masters in Hackering City who were tasked with monitoring the god had all lost contact. It wasn't until the next day that they were discovered naked in front of the police station in the neighboring city, wearing nothing but boxers. By the way, although their wallets were still there, all the cash in them had disappeared. Because of this, they didn't even obtain first-hand information about the battle that happened in Hackering City a few days ago. Most of the information that was presented was obtained by sending people to investigate and restore the scene of the incident. Currently, The only yin-yang master who could normally come into contact with the god was the little guy from Hanakia. In this incident, Tsuchimikado Motoki didn't place high hopes on Hanakia, but rather the god from Huaxia. Please, don't let me down. Chapter 98. Su Shinshing sneezed. So dirty. Chihaya Fukuyama immediately held his lunchbox and distanced himself from him. The god training had been going on for 3 consecutive days. Under Su Shinshing's training, Chihaya Fukuyama could actually sense the divine power in his blood. This was a situation that even Su Shinshing himself did not expect. After all, this guy's divine position was not complete, and the training methods were all made up by him. You actually despise your own master for being dirty. Do you know that your master's heart hurts? Su Shinshing carelessly wiped his nose and ordered Chihaya Fukuyama. The girl completely ignored his accusation and quickly finished her lunchbox. Then she put away the lunchbox, stood up, and patted the dust off her short skirt. Hey, I was just joking, you don't have to be so angry, right? Seeing that the girl was about to leave, Su Shinshing could not help but feel a little bored. Recently, whether it was Chihaya or Yuka, they seemed to have mastered a way to deal with him. No matter what he did, they would ignore it. This was the most subtle situation that Su Shinshing, who was somewhat crazy, found the most unbearable. I'm not happy. I want to destroy Fusang. So, he simply rolled on the floor. Emoli, who was quietly eating a cucumber-flavored scallop, was shocked and had an expression that said, "My lines have been pirated. You're a god. Can you not do such childish things?" Chihaya helplessly sighed. It's just that today Student Wu, the president of the student union of Huanghua University asked for leave, and the other members have a lot of work to do, even I have to help deal with it. I was the one who snuck over to practice before lunch. You should be content. Usually, they did not feel it at all, but when Wu Yejin was not around, the members of the student union suddenly realized, damn, the president has to deal with so much work by himself. Just how capable is that person? Then, they all fell into a never-ending work hell. If it wasn't for the fact that they had no other choice, they wouldn't have asked Chihaya for help. As a god candidate, your life is really hard. Su Shinshing looked at Chihaya sympathetically. I don't want to be told that by the current deity who huddles with housewives to fight for special deals during the supermarket sale. Chihaya made a face at Su Shinshing and skipped down the White Bell Mountain. Mr. Landlord, I want to eat your lunchbox. Emoli came over and said coquettishly, why don't you ask the guy next to you who is in a daze? Su Shinshing asked in puzzlement as he handed over his lunchbox. I've already taken all the sausages inside. Emoli gave Su Shinshing a thumbs up. This guy's desire to eat meat is still so strong. Is it because he is afraid of being poor in Sakura Apartments? Fortunately, I made a small fortune from the stalking yin-yang master some time ago, so I can still afford to pay for his food. While Emoli was munching on his lunchbox, Su Shinshing came to Hanaquin Yuan. Recently, she had also become a frequent visitor to the White Bell Shrine. When she had no classes, she often came here to drink the tea made by Sakura Kobayashi and to avoid a girl named Yasako. Before this, she seemed to only go to the library. Now, the girl had a dull expression and stopped eating halfway through her lunchbox. This was not the first time he saw this expression. Now, the girl must have connected her consciousness to the spirit-branded retainer she left in the exhibition hall. After they found the suspicious person the day before yesterday, they found the person twice in a row, but they lost him both times. They did not know how the person escaped. So in order to deal with this situation, the girl cast a special spell on her spirit-branded retainer. As long as the spirit-branded retainer detected someone with a similar appearance to that person, the spell would be triggered, and the girl's consciousness would be connected to the spirit-branded retainer to determine whether or not it was the person they were chasing. But whether it was because the spell was flawed or simply because there were too many suspicious people, Yuan would be absent-minded at least 17 or 18 times a day. If it were not for the fact that she did not talk much, someone would have noticed that something was wrong. Looking at the girl's slightly haggard and dull face, Su Shinshing thought for a moment and then took out a marker pen. I don't think this is right, Goddess-ama. But before he could write the word meat on Yoyuen's forehead, he was stopped by Asahi Sakurakanji, who came out with tea. "No, Asahi, you've misunderstood," Su Shinshing said righteously. "It's just that Hanakiya has been too tired recently. In order to make her happy, I'm going to do some harmless pranks. But I feel that if you do this, no one will be happy except yourself. Asahi, do you know that the emotions of gods can affect ordinary people? As long as I'm happy, everyone else will be happy." Su Shinshing continued to talk nonsense seriously. "I'm going to use pranks to make people smile. Goddess-sama, if you don't plan to stop, what? I'm going to change your toothpaste to mustard, put glue on your chair, fill your shampoo with paint, and hide 10 alarm clocks in your bedroom, all of which are set at 3 o'clock in the morning." Su Shinshing stared blankly at the girl who was smiling brightly. "Not good, this girl is serious. The other pranks don't matter, but the paint one is too hurtful, so I have to be careful." So he could only regretfully put away the marker pen and give up the plan to prank the absent-minded Hanakiya with the marker pen. Sakura Kanji showed a satisfied smile. "Speaking of which, Goddess-ama, haven't you caught the suspicious person yet? Because the person escaped too quickly. Although it's not impossible to catch him, it's meaningless. Besides, Hanakiya won't be happy if I meddle too much. Anyway, it's not my home. Even if something is stolen here, it has nothing to do with Su Shinshing. Why should I waste so much effort for nothing? If Su Shinshing thinks like this, I'm afraid that the current Inyang head of Inyang Liao will feel that he's a bad judge of character from the bottom of his heart. But won't Hanakiya have a hard time?" Sakura Kanji looked at the haggard girl and couldn't help but sympathize with her. "Can't you help seriously?" "Omelette rice." "Huh? The price of helping seriously." Su Shinshing scratched his head and showed a helpless smile. "I want to eat omelette rice for dinner." Asahi Sakura Kanji looked at Su Shinshing, and then she smiled gently. "No problem. Why don't you leave it to me? I want to eat hamburger steak." Hearing that the topic changed to food, Mo Lee immediately raised his chopsticks and inserted himself into the conversation, flower-shaped omelette on top. Chapter 99. When it came to helping seriously, Su Shinshing first thought of the tracking talismans that Xingyan A Dream gave him. However, since he couldn't get the divine position back, and he probably couldn't get it back, the only way to activate those talismans was to ask Imoli to go with him to the exhibition. Actually, Hanakeyuan's Reiki should be able to activate the talismans too, but Qin Xingyan didn't seem to like the practitioners from Fusang. Plus, the talismans made by some sects were secrets, so when Su Shinshing went here, Qin Xingyan repeatedly warned him not to show the talismans to the practitioners here. Although Su Shinshing also had doubts like, why is it okay to show it to me and Emoli? In the end, he attributed it to the girl's good intentions. No matter how active his mind was, he probably wouldn't have thought that those old guys in the Bailu temple were thinking of selling the talismans for export. After making a few calls to Qin Xingyan, he found that the other party's phone was always busy. Considering the price of international calls, Su Shinshing finally gave up on the idea of asking Qin Xingyan A Dream for help. The number of visitors today seems to be a bit less than 2 days ago. Su Shinshing looked at the surrounding tourists and couldn't help but mutter. By the way, for the sake of saving costs, the three of them didn't buy tickets this time. They relied on Mo Lee's invisibility magic to sneak in. In this regard, Su Shinshing expressed that he was very disappointed that he didn't have the opportunity to use his proud skill, can't see me, physics. It's not an interesting exhibition to begin with. The popularity will soon die down. Hanakeyuan explained casually, but after school on Sunday, the number of people should pick up. That's more beneficial for us. Efficiency first. Hanakeyuan waved the phone in his hand and said coolly, let's split up. What? You're actually abandoning us? Su Shinshing's face was shocked. Then, Emoli took advantage of Yuan's confusion and ran over to hug her leg, cutely shouting. Suddenly, the surrounding tourists, who were attracted by Su Shinshing's loud voice, imagined in their minds a 40-episode drama about family ethics and relationships. The reason why it wasn't an idol drama was that Su Shinshing's ordinary face didn't have any special features. It was a bit unfair to the audience. No, it's not. Su Shenxing's heart was filled with joy as he watched Chang Yu's little face turn red with shame and anger as she fled to the other exhibition halls. He finally fulfilled his dream of pranking her at noon. Yup, it's about time to be a little more serious. The reason why he did this wasn't just to prank her, but because Su Shenxing didn't want the girl to pay attention to her surroundings. The reason was simple, was that a certain suspicious persons to this exhibition. The farce just now had successfully attracted the other party's attention. At this moment, the big guy was looking at Su Shenxing with a harsh gaze full of scrutiny. However, because Su Shenxing's body had a mosaic halo, without his permission, all the magic eyes that could detect other people's information and the vision with special observation ability would be affected, and they couldn't see any details about him. But for people who had this kind of ability, not being able to see any abnormality was the biggest abnormality. It was like playing a real-time strategy game and opening the whole map, but there was still a black spot on the map. It was hard for people not to notice it. The current situation was also the same. Oh, this time he actually dares to compare the size of my eyes. This suspicious person is too arrogant. After looking at the other person for a few seconds and finding that his eyes were not as big as the guy with thick eyebrows and big eyes, Su Shenxing couldn't help but become angry. Now that there were many people in the exhibition hall, it would be a little troublesome to deal with the other person. It seemed that he could only get close to the other person with a punch that couldn't be seen by the human eye and was so fast that even the air couldn't detect it. At the same time, he had to be careful not to punch too hard. Otherwise, half of the other person's body would be blown away like the centipede a few days ago. After that, he had to pretend that the other person wasn't feeling well, supported his body in time, and took the unconscious person out of the museum with the excuse of taking him to the hospital. Then he would have the initiative to steam, boil, braise, or fry him. Just as Su Shenxing was about to do it, the lights in the exhibition hall suddenly went out. Because it was evening, the sky was already dark, and the exhibition hall suddenly fell into darkness. At this moment, the suspicious man that Su Shenxing had locked onto had already pulled out two swords from somewhere. One was a regular katana with a thin green color on the blade. Even in the dark, it shone like a wolf's eye. The other was a short sword made of gold and silver that was 6 inches and 5 centimeters long. No matter which one it was lingering with a strong aura of death and resentment. It was likely that it had killed a lot of people, ghosts, and demons. Although the burly man was burly, his movements were more agile than apes. With a kind of high-speed footwork that humans couldn't do, he rushed to the front of Su Shenxing and attacked Su Shenxing's vital points with the two swords respectively. The other person's swordsmanship hid nearly 1,000 changes. Even if Su Shenxing dodged now, no matter how he dodged, the other person only needed to slightly change the trajectory and cut him down with the swords. Well, of course, it was just a saying. Su Shenxing, who had experienced hundreds of battles, didn't realize how exquisite the burly man's swordsmanship was. He only subconsciously kicked, and the other person consecutively broke through several walls. His whole body flew straight out of the museum and hit his head on a taxi outside the museum. On the way, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and the colorful magic tools on his body flickered and disappeared. It seemed that they were all overloaded and useless. I accidentally used too much strength. Su Shenxing couldn't help but show a regretful expression. It's all that guy's fault. He inexplicably ran to a position that was suitable for me to kick. I had no choice but to kick him. Mo Li patted Su Shenxing's shoulder with an inexplicable expression and didn't comment on Su Shenxing's behavior. At this time, the lights in the hall lit up again, but everyone's attention was attracted by the big hole in the wall. I found a suspicious person in that exhibition hall. Before Hua Kaiyuan, who hurried over, finished speaking, she looked at the human-shaped hole in the wall with a confused expression, and then looked at the innocent-looking Su Shenxing. Suddenly, the girl had a feeling that this deity who blamed her had caused a big disaster. In short, Su Shenxing said somewhat awkwardly, "I think that guy can still be saved." Chapter 100. Normally, what should one do to save a person? Emergency bandage? Bandages, medical tape, and Holy Spirit medicine were not brought over from Sakura's apartment. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation? If he were to hit him with his palm, this guy would probably be dead by then. Mouth-to-mouth resuscitation? I choose a dog belt. Su Xinxing gave up on thinking and decided to call an ambulance for the unknown burly man as a passerby. Then he and Mo Li followed Hanakyu Yuan, who was the only one who was still uneasy, to track down the suspicious person that the girl found in another exhibition hall. Unlike the burly man that Su Xinxing found, who seemed to be a human with some special abilities, Yuan, who was sent away by him, was actually lucky. It was just that she lost track of the person because of the sudden power outage. Thinking that Su Xinxing might have a way to track the person, she came to ask for help. Otherwise, according to the girl's personality, she would probably chase after the person alone. Using the tracking talisman, the three of them really caught up with the suspicious person who didn't change his attire much on a road not far from the exhibition hall. The person seemed to be on high alert. After noticing that the three of them were coming, he immediately ran along the edge of the river by the road, using the various slopes, trees, and bridge piers on the riverbank as cover to block the three of their vision. In theory, this kind of behavior shouldn't be very effective. After all, Su Xinxing had the ghost spirit to help track him, and Yuan had the Shikigami to help her. But this time, just like the previous two times, the person suddenly disappeared. Only the three of them were left behind. Is it a teleportation spell? Hanakyu and Yuan looked under the bridge twice, but couldn't find any trace of the person. In the end, she could only guess. No, there were no fluctuations in space just now. Because he accidentally cut open space when he was practicing swinging his sword, what happened afterwards left a bad memory for our protagonist. So Su Xinxing was very sensitive to fluctuations in space, water escape. Mo Li pointed at the river on the side. At this time, Su Xinxing suddenly remembered that when they failed several times in a row, the side of the road was either a river or a drainage ditch connected to the underground waterways on both sides of the road. If the other party was really the type that could use water to escape, as long as he could block the vision of the spirit demons and spirit-branded retainers for an instant, he would be able to escape from those places. As expected of Mo Li, who was the most proficient in magic among the three of them, he was actually able to guess the method that the other two had used to escape. However, even if it used water to escape, to be able to enter the water without leaving a trace, not even a ripple, it should be a relatively high-level aquatic creature. If Su Xinxing and the others were in Europe, they would be able to determine that the real culprit was either the high slimes or the Undine sprite. Unfortunately, perhaps because Japan was near the sea, there were many water elemental humanoid and half-humanoid monsters. The master of the sea market, the little monk of the cliff, the emerging conch, the bamboo maiden, the Chuan Yuan, the sea maiden room, the water demon, the turtle Qing Ku, the sea disaster magician, the little monk Lang, the cliff demon, the sea throne head, the sea ghost, the master of the rockfish market, and so on. Even the dried corpse of the Kappa in the exhibition was an expert in this field when it was alive. By the way, the cultivators on the side of the Celestial Empire, apart from Hebo sea serpent, prawn soldiers, crab generals, and other monsters with special titles, the other aquatic monsters that were humanoid or half-humanoid were collectively called water monkeys, so theoretically, all deep-sea ships were basically water monkeys. In short, although they still couldn't catch the monster that coveted the treasure this time, they finally got some information about it. If they met it again, they could focus on this point and capture it. From this point of view, this operation could be said to be a big gain. But this couldn't make up for the loss of the Yin-Yang Liao. In the short few seconds when the power was cut off, the Shimaru Kakadaka, which was placed outside the exhibition hall, was stolen. Dividing line. This was the exclusive underground hospital of the Yin-Yang Liao in the capital. It was used to treat some symptoms that were difficult to understand with the pathology of the secular world, such as being cursed by the heavenly evil ghost, or difficult to treat with the medical standards of the secular world, such as being kicked by the gods. Tsuchimikado Genki walked through the long corridor. The medical staff who passed by him all bowed to him, and he just nodded slightly. After turning a corner, he pushed open the door and walked into a ward. When he saw the patient on the bed who looked as though he had been hit by a train, His entire body was covered in white bandages with runes written all over it. He was even wearing a cast and could not move at all. At once, this man, who was often called the Fox of Yin and Yang, could not help but laugh out loud, which was a rare sight. This also made the man on the bed, who might have died 8 to 10 times in an ordinary hospital, realize that someone had come. "You're recovering well, Minamoto Genki." Tsuchimikado Genki restrained his expression and changed back to the usual fox-like fake smile. He said softly, "Ordinary doctors will definitely want to dissect you to see what your body structure is like after seeing you recover so quickly." "Humph, are you here to laugh at my appearance of a loser, Tsuchimikado Genki?" Because his face was also covered by bandages like a mummy, his expression couldn't be seen, but Minamoto Genki was sure that his current expression was either anger or embarrassment. "I remember that I once warned you not to provoke the D-sama over there, but you didn't listen. At that time, I didn't know that guy was by Ling's GED. This time, Minamoto Genki didn't answer with a contemptuous attitude, but a little helpless. At the same time, he also felt a burst of frustration deep in his heart. As one of the few powerhouses in Fuso, he, like his ancestor, received the teachings of Heavenly Crow Tengu and learned martial arts that ordinary humans couldn't master. After being recognized by Heavenly Crow Tengu, he inherited his ancestors' Tachi Bo Midori and short sword Jin Ken, which allowed him to stand at the peak of Fuso. Even Tsuchimikado Genki, who could completely rely on the power of Martial Song Star, only had a 50% chance of winning against him. But yesterday, the passerby face man who looked ordinary, but was actually very strange, shattered all his years of pride and glory with a kick. This body, which had been tempered thousands of times to obtain a defense that was far stronger than ordinary steel, was completely useless. If it weren't for the Tengu's talisman that Heavenly Crow Tengu gave him, the moon fragment that he obtained from the rabbit demon in the bright night bamboo forest, and some defensive treasures that he collected over the years, he would have been summoned by his master's pet, were all the G.O.D.S. in Huaxia monsters. Chapter 101. For some reason, the protagonists of recent games liked to climb to higher places. For example, the assassin who wore a white hood and jumped on the roofs of medieval Europe to find the synchronization point, or the treasure hunter who had retired but was persuaded by his brother to start exploring again. Su Shenxing didn't like high places. They always reminded him of the unpleasant landing method when he first landed on a terrestrial planet outside the solar system from the universe. It took him a lot of time to climb to the surface from the crater he made. Just like an old saying in Japan, only smoke and idiots liked high places. Su Shenxing deeply agreed with this. But today, he had to be an idiot for once. He was now on the roof of a building. Beside him was Hanakiyuan Yuan, who was concentrating on searching for the enemy with a telescope and a rusty water tower. Behind him was a large billboard of a popular artist a few years ago, but now no one cared about him. Emoli didn't come out because he wanted to watch an animation today. He didn't know if today was a special case or a normal phenomenon as usual. Today, the wind whistled on the stairs, blowing Su Shenxing's hair into a mess. Since he knew that the opponent was a water monster, and he could confirm that the opponent's target was the exhibition hall, it was naturally much easier to wait for him. The exhibition hall was diagonally below the building they were in, and the road they were guarding was also the only way from the riverside to the exhibition hall, unless the monster intended to endure the drought and come from the other side of the county. But judging from its rough disguise and clumsy movements, it wasn't so easy to do. What's more, the only treasure left in the exhibition hall was the Dujijiri Yasutsuna. As long as the opponent was a little eager for quick success and wanted to grab the treasure and run away like yesterday, taking the shortest road to the riverside, then it was bound to be blocked by Su Shenxing and Hanakeyuan Yuan. Moreover, compared to the chaotic stadium that could easily cause a commotion, the slightly deserted streets below were more suitable for fighting with the enemy. Su Shenxing yawned out of boredom. So he decided to start harassing Hanakeyuan Yuan, who was working seriously. As a spellcaster, I don't think it's appropriate to use a telescope. Don't you have any observation spells? No one said that a practitioner has to use magic to do everything and cannot use modern scientific instruments. The girl didn't even turn her head. She only replied in a cold voice, "Lord God, if that's what you think, then all the Onmyogus would have to be naked." What she meant was that modern clothes were all produced by industrial assembly lines and could be considered the crystallization of modern technology. Even Yin-Yang master clothes were no exception. If he didn't wear them, he would have to run around naked. In other words, you don't know any observation-type tactics, right? Su Shenxing looked at the side of the girl's face and completely ignored the other party's answer. Instead, he continued to guess. Yuan felt that he probably had nothing better to do than to pay attention to this Vai-sama who was looking for trouble. Sure enough, he should have followed what Chizeo-senpai said from the beginning and ignored this D-sama's mischievous antics. Seeing that Hua Kaiyuan didn't answer, Su Shenxing simply took it as her acquiescence. "By the way, will that guy come today? It's the first time I've seen you perform a divination, and you're using poker cards. I always feel that it's not very accurate." So he continued to look for other topics. Generally speaking, shouldn't you use tarot cards for divination? Poker cards were used as divination props by the gypsies before the 7th century, and tarot cards appeared in the 15th century. So in fact, poker cards have a longer history and a higher degree of mystery. If you master the method of using them, the success rate of divination will be higher. With a poker face, Yuan explained all the information about the poker cards in a loud and clear tone. If Su Shenxing was just looking for something to talk about, then she had already made up her mind to ignore him. But now that Su Shenxing was questioning the success rate of her divination, then the competitive Yuan naturally couldn't help but refute a few words. By the way, the reason why she didn't refute before was because she really didn't know any other observation-type spells apart from connecting to the senses of paper spirit-branded retainers, that is, the humanoid paper. Is that so? However, the girl didn't get the reaction she wanted. Su Shenxing was looking at the sky absent-mindedly, trying to maintain his original hairstyle with his hand. After hearing the girl's explanation, he just casually answered, "Goto-sama is really leisurely. You must have no worries." For some reason, Yuan, who had been expressionless, suddenly said this. Although it was still in a serious tone, Su Shenxing could hear some complaints in it. "Of course not. My worries are enough to fill a 3.5-inch floppy disk. It's so small, a 3.5-inch floppy disk has a capacity of about 144 m. Don't say it's small." Su Shenxing gave up and let his hair dance in the wind. "When I was in my hometown, I worried about food every day. In addition, a lot of the furniture in my house is about to be replaced. Speaking of which, I still haven't bought the pajamas I promised Emoli. Also, the water, electricity, gas, and all kinds of other expenses are troubling me." Hanakeyuan, who heard Su Shenxing talk about these things for the first time, had a slightly strange expression on her face. After all, because of the robbery, the hero had helped the Yin-Yang masters who were secretly spying on him, so our hero had some extra money on hand, and he wasn't as poor as he was in his hometown. "Goto-sama, aren't you very powerful? You shouldn't have to worry about money." Hanakeyuan was very curious about this. Although the girl didn't know what level Su Shenxing's strength was, if he could easily subdue her, it meant that at least in Japan, there weren't many people who could defeat this Goto-sama. But even Hanakeyuan, who always worked for the Yin-Yang masters for her family, had a bank account that was far more than the savings of an ordinary rich family. Logically speaking, Su Shenxing, who was more powerful, shouldn't be worried about money. Hearing Hanakeyuan's question, Su Shenxing was silent for a while, then he raised his head. "It's not impossible to tell you the reason, but as an equivalent exchange, can you also tell me your worries?" The girl showed a vigilant look. This made Su Shenxing feel a little hurt. It seemed that recently he had been teasing the girl a little more, so she was on guard against him. But after a while, when Su Shenxing was thinking about whether to reduce the pranks in the future, the girl suddenly said in a low voice, "Okay, but Goto-sama, please tell me first." Chapter 102. Humans were social animals. From a normal point of view, after the age of firearms, the strength of an individual would not have much meaning. But what if that strength was enough to subvert the so-called common sense? There was no doubt that the powerful individual could break the rules of society and even disregard the integrity of society to extract the greatest wealth from the human body. And Su Xinxing was strong enough to subvert common sense. You see, because I'm super powerful, if I want, there are many ways to easily amass a lot of wealth. Because he usually just swung his sword, Su Xinxing was not very good at talking. While organizing his words in his mind, he slowly said, for example, robbing a bank or something. The girl had an expression that said, I feel something is wrong. Well, let's put aside robbing a bank for now. As for other methods, such as using personal safety as a threat, it's not difficult to get a group of outstanding subordinates to work for me to make money. And I'm not afraid of them betraying me, because even if they betray me, they can't hurt me even a little bit, and they have to pay with their lives. After 1 or 2 times, most people will learn to give up the path of betrayal and work honestly. After all, humans' ability to adapt to the environment is almost second only to tardigrades and cockroaches. Livestock? The girl said softly. Well, almost the same thing. Because I'm super powerful, even if someone comes to crusade against me, I'm afraid it's useless. Although you may not believe it, even if I become the enemy of the entire human race, there's no possibility of me losing. So this kind of reign of terror will continue until I get tired of it. In fact, after falling out with human society, things like money are useless to me. Maybe when the time comes, I'll simply rule the entire human race with an iron fist. While speaking, Su Xinxing scratched his face and showed a somewhat disappointed and bitter smile. But I'm not good at governing a territory. When the time comes, the whole world will probably fall into chaos, and those with power will learn from me. The strong will wantonly plunder everything from the weak, social development will rapidly regress, and order, morality, and justice will be completely trampled into the mud. Ordinary people can only struggle to survive in the darkness at the bottom. For some reason, Su Xinxing's words were unexpectedly vivid, as if he had experienced it himself, and even made Hua Kaiyuan shiver involuntarily. Compared to that kind of world, I really prefer this kind of daily life. That's why I try my best to abide by the rules of the surface world and restrict myself to the category of ordinary people. Because I'm the strongest, no matter who or what existence wants to destroy the balance or order of society, I can take them down as a law-abiding ordinary person. Well, to put it in a slightly Chunibi way, I'm probably the so-called partner of justice. Speaking of this, Su Xinxing tilted his head. He seemed to feel that there was something wrong with his words. Well, how should I put it? I'm not very good at saying this kind of thing, so there may be some words that don't convey the meaning. In short, what I want to say is pretty much the same. It's good that you can understand. To put it simply, it was more or less the same as this. I'm not targeting anyone, but even I, who's super powerful, know my place. I don't even need to use my supernatural abilities, so what reason do the trash here have to jump out and cause trouble? It's true that the words are not clear. Hua Kaiyuan's straightforward words made Su Xinxing have some subtle stomach pain. But immediately, the girl raised the corner of her mouth, showing a slight smile. However, I almost understand the meaning. Goddess-sama is unexpectedly a good person. Wugu, Su Xinxing's stomach pain intensified. Recently, he always felt that he seemed to have received a lot of good person cards. In order to hide his embarrassment, Su Xinxing simply knocked on the railing like a child. You said it, now it's your turn. Hurry up and tell me your troubles, I'll use it to make fun of you. My story is not as interesting as Goddess-sama's. The girl hesitated for a moment, and finally slowly told it. Dividing line. Hua Kaiyuan was once the branch family of the greatest Onmyoji family, the Tukamon family. In order to maintain the purity of the family bloodline and the talent of the next generation, several great Onmyoji families in Fusang would have marriage alliances. Hua Kaiyuan family was no exception. It was just that in recent years, Hua Kaiyuan was gradually declining. In order to change the situation, the former head of Hua Kaiyuan, who was Yo Yuan's father, Hua Kaiyuan, wanted to form an alliance with a new Onmyoji family called the Yoshida family at the cost of marriage. If they succeeded, Hanako clan would have a chance to be reborn. The Yoshida family was one of the few yin-yang master clans that was still on the rise in this era where spiritual energy was scarce. Furthermore, they had a considerable amount of family property in the mortal world. The woman named Isami of the Yoshida family was also deeply in love with Hua Kaiyuan's father. Once she married, she would definitely be a good wife who thought about the Hua Kaiyuan family. Unfortunately, Yuyuan was not able to inquire about the relationship between the two of them when her father was alive. Originally, the two of them were a match made in heaven, but because of an unexpected event, the future of the two people changed, and Hua Kaiyuan was completely pushed into the abyss of despair. Hua Kaiyuan's father, Hua Kaiyuan Yuji, fell in love with a monster. No one knew what the monster's body was. The only thing that the survivors who had seen it could describe was that when it appeared, it was always accompanied by the flames of the red lotus calamity fire and the beautiful posture of the flames. It was because of this that in the files of Yin-Yang Shirtao, the monster whose body was unknown was called Calamity Fire of Heaven and Earth. Later, Hua Kaiyuan Yuji and the monster had a child. 5 years later, the news spread out from unknown means. It was not rare for Onmyoji to fall in love with a monster, but in order to ensure the safety of the monster, since ancient times, once a Onmyoji fell in love with a monster, it must transform the monster into their Shikigami, and the Shikigami could not be the main wife. But Hua Kaiyuan Yuji refused this approach. He did not want to bind his wife with the identity of a Shikigami, and after having that monster, he did not intend to marry anyone else. Finally, the heartbroken girl of the Yoshida family ran away from home without any news. Hua Kaiyuan Yuji was tried by Yin-Yang Shirtao and was put under house arrest. The Yoshida family, who was angry out of shame, also joined with several other emerging Onmyoji families to attack the Hua Kaiyuan family, so the once prominent Hua Kaiyuan family completely declined. After that, the monster called Calamity Fire of Heaven and Earth made a lot of trouble in Yin-Yang Shirtao, but it was defeated by Tsuchimikado Motu, who had just been promoted to Dr. Quan at that time. At the critical moment, Hua Kaiyuan Yuji, who broke through the prison, blocked the joint attack of the surrounding Onmyoji for his wife, but because of this, he was seriously injured and dying. Finally, the fire monster took Hua Kaiyuan Yuji and disappeared over Yin-Yang Shirtao. 3 days later, the soul lamp of Hua Kaiyuan Yuji, which represented Hua Kaiyuan Yuji in the ancestral house, was extinguished. Other people did not even know where the last great Onmyoji of Hua Kaiyuan Yuji died. After I was 5 years old, I never saw the woman who was my mother again. Yuji said in a calm voice, but Su Xinxing felt that under the girl's calm expression, all her sadness and pain for more than 10 years were hidden. The person who raised me was Auntie Ime. She has been protecting me and not letting me bathe in the strange eyes of others. Until Auntie Ime died of illness, she told me not to hate my parents, to work hard to learn Onmyoji and become a great Onmyoji like my father, to revive the glory of the Hua Kaiyuan family. But, no matter what, I have to catch that monster with my own hands. The girl turned her head, and her eyes flashed with an expression full of unwillingness and hatred that Su Xinxing had never seen on her face. The calamity fire of heaven and earth that gave me and Auntie Ime countless painful memories. Chapter 103. How should he put it? Su Xinxing, who was also a left-behind child, could understand Hanakeyuan Yoyuen's feelings to a certain extent. She was abandoned by her parents for more than 10 years, and the only person who raised her like family was her father's old lover. Not only that, but she also received strange looks from others when she was growing up, because the mother who abandoned her was a monster. In addition, as a Onmyoji, she was gradually influenced by the values of Onmyoji generations, so it was understandable that she hated her biological mother, who was the source of everything. But Su Xinxing always felt that the girl's way of thinking was distorted by her resentment of her parents' abandonment, which made this hatred a little subtle. I said from the beginning, it's not that interesting. Seeing the expression on Su Xinxing's face, Hanakeyuan naturally guessed some of his thoughts. The girl pushed back her medium-long hair that covered half of her face because of the wind and set up the binoculars again. Su Xinxing also felt that the distance between him and the girl had imperceptibly increased. Only now did he understand why the girl was so cold to others, and why she chose to confess her past to him just now. Perhaps this girl named Hanakeyuan Yuyuan had been alone after the death of her aunt named I. Because of her background, she was not accepted by Onmyogus. Most of her contact with mortals was for missions. Not only was there no way to understand each other, but just casually building a good relationship with them might cause innocent people to be involved in supernatural events. And her identity as a Onmyoji doomed her to be unable to live peacefully with monsters, unless those monsters willingly became her shikigami. Thinking about it this way, Su Xinxing's current identity was indeed very special to the girl. According to the philosophy of Fuso Shinto, most of the so-called gods were actually similar in nature to monsters, but they would not be rejected by Onmyogus. Su Xinxing's own strength also determined that he would not be in any danger because of his relationship with Yuan. In addition, Su Xinxing shamelessly stayed at the girl's house, because he did not have the money to rent a house, so the girl had a certain degree of understanding of his personality. So she told him her past, hoping to get Su Xinxing's understanding. Unfortunately, Su Xinxing failed to live up to her hopes. So the door of the girl's heart that had been loosened with great difficulty was tightly closed again. Actually, I'm about the same as you. Su Xinxing, who was very unhappy with this feeling, scratched his head, then sighed and told his story. That was before I became a god and a savior. My mother left me and my father when I was very young and ran away with a rich man. My father was an archaeologist. He didn't make much money and had to travel all over the world. He only returned home a few times a year. But unlike you, I don't have that thing to take care of me. Since I was young, I was the only one in the empty apartment. If it wasn't for my childhood friend who pulled me up, I'm afraid I would have degenerated into a delinquent. Lord God! She turned her head in surprise and looked at the young man who was hugging his knees and leaning against the wall with a look of indulgence on his face. Then something happened. In short, although I didn't go bald, I became stronger. If I wanted to, it wouldn't be difficult to find my mother. It wouldn't even be impossible to make my father transform into a tall, rich and handsome man to slap her face in front of her. Su Xinxing showed a slightly bitter smile. He fiddled with the bangs on his forehead and said softly, "When I first returned to Earth, I did have such an idea. I wanted to make that greedy and vain woman regret. I wanted to let her know that the son she regarded as a burden back then had become so amazing. But I gave up in the end, because doing so will only lead to emptiness and distort one's own desires. You won't be able to get anything other than that momentary pleasure. I didn't want to catch that person for the pleasure of revenge." Hanakeyuan Yuyuan fiercely smashed the binoculars in her hand on the railing. The lens shattered because of this. Clearly, the girl had lost her usual calmness. Then what is it for? Do you really hate your mother that much? Su Xinxing's words were like a knife stabbing into the girl's weak heart. If so, why would you subconsciously choose the word catch instead of the word retreat that yin-yang masters have always used? That's because... The girl stopped halfway and bit her lip as if she was enduring something. She was speechless. That's because you still want to see her again, right? In fact, you've always missed your mother and wanted to see her again. But the identity of a yin-yang master is like a shackle that imprisons your true thoughts, right? Su Xinxing pressed on step by step. I take back what I said before. Goddess-sama, you're a bad guy. Although she showed a weak expression for a moment, years of solitude had long made Hanakeyuan Yuyuan have a strong spirit that was different from ordinary people. Soon she returned to her usual cold state. But Su Xinxing always felt that she was different from before. I'm honored. He laughed and then made a pause gesture to the girl who still wanted to say something. Let's stop talking about this topic. Now we should get to work. Get to work. The girl was stunned, and then immediately understood what he meant. The target had appeared. Just as Yuyuan was about to use the binoculars to look at the target, she found that the lens above had been broken. So she glared at Su Xinxing with dissatisfaction. The latter whistled and pretended that he didn't know anything. But immediately, Su Xinxing stuck his head out and confirmed the target. Then, without saying anything to the girl, he picked her up by the waist and jumped over the railing. Yee! The girl, who was completely unprepared, was frightened by the extreme bungee jumping from the top of a 22-story building. Her eyes were full of tears, and her mouth made a mournful cry like a dying small animal. Her right hand tightly hugged Su Shenxing's broad back, and her left hand took out a large number of paper talismans. But as soon as the paper talismans left her hand, they were blown to some unknown corner by the wind when they fell, and didn't have any effect at all. Seeing that they were about to hit the ground, Su Shenxing fiercely kicked a few times, as if he was stepping on something, and the falling speed suddenly slowed down. When they fell to the ground, the impact of the fall was almost gone. Scared me to death. Even though they were on the ground, the girl was still tightly hugging Su Shenxing's waist. Her legs were weak, and she couldn't stand up. Not good, it seems that a little bit is missing. We landed safely. Stepping on air is really useful. Su Shenxing sighed with emotion. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have fallen into the ground. You're jumping off the building with me without even confirming it? Yuan was still trembling like a frightened kitten. Don't worry, if this trick doesn't work, I'll be your meat cushion. Is there any difference between that and me falling on an iron plate? My chest muscles may be slightly harder than an iron plate, right? Only now did Blossoming Garden Yuan confirm one thing. She needed to take back her words again. This guy wasn't a good person with bad intentions, but a lunatic. Chapter 104. After calming down a little in Hanakeyuan, she followed Su Shenxing and chased in the direction of the suspicious character. The suspicious character with a peaked cap also immediately discovered the two of them, but because the two of them outflanked it from the direction of the river, it wasn't so easy to use the same trick to escape into the river. The peaked cap guy looked around, then quickly ran to a fire hydrant and hugged the fire hydrant with both hands. The muscles on his arms bulged, even the skin burst, revealing the green skin underneath. With its strength, the fire hydrant was actually pulled out by it, and suddenly a stream of water gushed out like a fountain. Seeing that it was about to escape through the stream again, Su Shenxing snorted coldly and stomped on the ground fiercely. With a loud bang, the cement road was trampled by his foot, and a crater-like depression full of spiderweb-like cracks appeared on the ground. This foot stepped on the water supply pipe buried deep in the ground, completely blocking it. The water column that was originally a few meters high from the fire hydrant immediately turned into a thumb-thick trickle. Obviously, it wasn't enough to let the human-like creature escape. At the same time, Hanakeyuan Yuan also threw out his own talisman paper. Several talisman papers full of spells were stuck on the figure that was still in a daze because of Su Shenxing's powerful kick. Suddenly, the intertwined spell power firmly netted the figure, making it no longer have the ability to escape. Wait a minute. I admit defeat. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, the figure immediately held its head and shouted in a thick Kanto dialect, I didn't hurt anyone, don't treat me. At this time, Su Shenxing and Hanakeyuan Yuan had already run to the other side. Looking at the other side's cowardly appearance, they didn't know where to start. Anyway, let's take it away first. Soon, someone will hear the sound and come here. Thanks to Su Shenxing's big kick, now they could vaguely hear the sound of people approaching here. So the two people, mainly Su Shenxing, dragged the monster to a small alley not far away. The alley was a dead end, and the two tacitly blocked the entrance of the alley. If someone else passed by the alley and witnessed this scene, they would probably mistake it for a delinquent extorting an honest person. It wasn't easy to get out of Hanakeyuan Yuan's spell net, and at this time, the suspicious figure finally revealed its original appearance. It had a green, amphibian-like skin that secreted mucus to keep its body moist, a tortoise-like shell on its back, slender but muscular limbs, a beak-like beak, messy hair, and the iconic white bald spot on its head. All of these revealed the true identity of this creature to the two of them. This was a kappa. Tell me, why did you steal Anamaru Kakoku? Where did you hide it? The young girl took out a new stack of paper talismans from her waist pouch. With a light shake, the paper talismans began to emit blue flames. Then she put the paper talisman close to Kappa with a gloomy face and asked coldly, I didn't steal anything. I'm innocent. Kappa pitifully leaned its body against the wall behind it to avoid the blue flame, and its mouth kept complaining. Then why do you go to the exhibition all day long? The girl naturally wouldn't listen to the words of the other party and continued to ask. I just came to see my brother. Although I also wanted to bring it back to Rijin River, for many reasons I gave up in the end. Kappa explained intermittently. Its name was Kawajiro, originally a kappa living in Rijin River. About 400 years ago, its brother Kawataro was discovered by human beings when he stole cucumbers on the shore and was besieged by human beings, and finally died in the hands of a passing monk. After that, its brother's body was made into a mummy and hidden in Rilongji, Osaka. Although it had secretly gone there for so many years, in the end, it didn't dare to enter Rilongji, Osaka, where there were many monks. In recent years, Rilongji, Osaka refused tourists to visit the mummy of Kappa, so it didn't even have a chance to see it. But later, Kawajiro heard that there would be a huge exhibition in Hakuren County, and its brother's mummy would also be exhibited as an exhibit, so it came here from 100 miles away, just to see its brother who had died 400 years ago again. Halfway through, Kappa had already burst into tears, which made Su Shinshing have the illusion that he was bullying a child. Do you think it's true or false? He elbowed Yuan and whispered. It may be true. Yuan wasn't sure, but she also raised some doubts that she had encountered before. The last time Anamaru Kakoku was stolen, it was also in the hall when the exhibition hall lost power, so it shouldn't have time to do anything. And if it really stole Anamaru Kakoku, then when we tracked it, even if it hid in the water, Anamaru Kakoku shouldn't have disappeared. Speaking of this, the girl's face became a little flustered. If this kappa wasn't the thief, then it meant that the thief was someone else? And in order to track this kappa, she and Su Shinshing had now diverted their attention from the exhibition hall. Oh no, Dujijiri Yasutsuna. If you're worried about the sword, then don't worry. Su Shinshing calmly gave her a thumbs up. I already felt that something was wrong, so I left it at the exhibition as an insurance. Dividing line, Emoli, who was used as an insurance, sneezed. The little girl carelessly rubbed her face, revealing an exhausted expression. I'm tired. She leaned against the load-bearing pillar in the exhibition hall, her face full of weariness. I want to go home and watch cartoons. Miss Emoli, please be patient. We can go back when Disama returns to the exhibition hall. Asahi Sakura Kanji gently persuaded. By the way, Emoli, you just left home not long ago. Chihaya Fukuyama, who was pulled aside to act as a mobile wallet, complained with some dissatisfaction. The tickets here are so expensive, at least let me finish the tour first before going back. Emoli, who had walked around the exhibition hall with Su Shinshing yesterday, immediately showed a disgusted expression. I'm so sorry, I asked you to come and help when you're so busy. Asahi Sakura Kanji immediately apologized to Chihaya Fukuyama. Sigh, Junior Wuya still hasn't returned to school, the student council is in a mess. God knows how she used to deal with so many things by herself. Speaking of the student council, Chihaya also felt a little tired. If you don't mind, can I cook tonight's dinner? Asahi Sakura Kanji kindly suggested. How can I trouble a guest? Although I really want to say this, I really don't have the energy today, so Asahi, please. Leave it to me. Just as the two girls were having a feminine conversation, Emoli suddenly straightened up and looked in a direction. There's a strange smell. Chapter 105. Hearing Emoli's words, Chihaya Fukuyama and Asahi Sakura Kanji both sniffed hard. But other than the smell of sweat that was unique to tourists, they didn't smell anything strange. So the two of them looked at Emoli again. Just then, a scream came from the exhibition hall where the Dujijiri Yasutsuna was hidden. What's wrong? Chihaya Fukuyama quickly ran over. Mayama-sama, it's dangerous. Asahi Sakura Kanji didn't have time to stop her, and Chihaya's motor was much better than hers, so he could only run after the girl. The people in the exhibition hall were frantically running out, and the two of them spent a lot of effort to squeeze in. In the end, they found a blue humanoid figure waving the Dujijiri Yasutsuna, wantonly killing the tourists around who didn't have time to escape. The originally clean floor was now covered in blood, and a few people who looked like security guards were lying on the ground, with deep knife wounds on their bodies. They had completely lost their lives. The blue humanoid figure was a supernatural creature, and other than Chihaya Fukuyama and Sakura Kanji who had astral vision, the others probably saw the old Tachi suddenly fly out of the exhibition hall and start attacking the people around it. Is this Satoshi Fu? Although Chihaya Fukuyama was a candidate to become a deity, she didn't deliberately pay attention to or learn about the inner world, so she could only speculate with her shallow knowledge in this situation. No, sword-type Satoshi Fu are usually called blades, and it's the sword itself that moves on its own. Obviously, there's something controlling the Dojijiri Yasutsuna. Asahi Sakurakanji obviously knew more than Chihaya Fukuyama, and immediately understood that something was wrong. Mayama-sama, it's too dangerous here, you should leave first. After all, she had already experienced the monster Daibai Zu attacking her for Chihaya's godhood. To be safe, it was better to put Chihaya's safety first. However, in just a short while, the blue humanoid figure discovered the two people at the entrance of the exhibition hall, and abandoned a half-dead tourist to slash at them. Chihaya thought that the figure's target was her, and subconsciously pushed Sakura Kanji away, wanting to at least not hurt her. But what she didn't expect was that the blue ball of light would retract its blade midway, and then attack again. This time, it was clearly aimed at Sakura Kobayashi Asahi who had fallen to the ground. The figure's target wasn't her, but Asahi. At that moment, Chihaya realized what was going on. She shouted this body she ran. But as a mere mortal, she was unable to reach Asahi in time. Why was it like this? It was the first time she had someone she could be friends with for life, but because of her own powerlessness, she couldn't save her, and could only watch her die. What god candidate? What human god? What god worshipped by the White Bell Shrine? What god worshipped by the White Bell Shrine? Wasn't he unable to do anything? Bitter regret filled Chihaya's heart. If only she had worked harder to learn how to become a god from that unreliable god. If only she had compromised a little earlier, and accepted the power that had brought her endless misfortune. If only she had been a little stronger. For the first time in her life, Chihaya Fukuyama began to yearn for the power of a god from the bottom of her heart. She wanted to protect her only friend. The next moment, the ancient divine power that came from the depths of her blood throbbed, and emerged from the depths of the girl's soul along with another domineering divine power in her body. It cleansed her every cell, causing her body to undergo a qualitative change in an instant, and her life form also ascended to a higher level. At this moment, the human Chihaya Fukuyama disappeared. At this moment, the god Chihaya Fukuyama was born. The storm formed by the divine power completely destroyed the exhibition hall where most of the people who could still move had already fled. However, the blue and golden flames ignited on the girl's body replaced the lighting system to illuminate the entire exhibition hall. She opened her eyes. Her left pupil was imbued with the divine power of the Hupachuan dragon god, and it shone with an icy blue color. Her right eye, on the other hand, was imbued with the divine might of the Huaxia martial god, and it shone with a golden light like the sun. However, the girl's ascension didn't stop the blue ball of light. Dojijiri Yasutsuna still slashed towards Asahi Sakurakanji's slender neck. However, Mo Lee, who had run off to God knows where, suddenly jumped out from a corner and kicked the handle of Dojijiri Yasutsuna, sending it flying. The blue ball of light disappeared like a puff of smoke the moment the Tachi left his hand. When the Dojijiri Yasutsuna fell to the ground, it reappeared from the hilt of the Tachi like a cloud and transformed back into its human form. However, after seeing that Sakura Xiaolu's crisis had been resolved, Jasmine did not continue to pursue. Instead, she raised the chicken roll that she seemed to have gotten from the KFC beside the museum. It seems that she went to buy the chicken roll just now. She shouted, "Revive, my brave warrior." The people who were killed by Dojijiri Yasutsuna stood up like marionettes and murmured in unison, "We fight for you, my lady." A spell that can bring people back to life. This is impossible. Asahi Sakurakanji looked at the scene in front of her and couldn't help but cover her mouth in shock. She even forgot that she was almost beheaded. However, that didn't mean that the other girl had forgotten as well. Chihaya Fukuyama, who was controlled by her divine power due to her anger, waved her left hand. The ground of the exhibition hall cracked with a harsh sound. Then, she pulled out the water from the ground and threw it towards the monster holding the tachi like a huge water dragon. However, the monster just swung Dojijiri Yasutsuna and cut the water dragon into pieces. As one of the few remaining mythical weapons, Dojijiri Yasutsuna could cut Chihaya Fukuyama's divine power like cutting dough. However, Chihaya Fukuyama didn't care. She waved her right hand and exerted an invisible force on the Dojijiri Yasutsuna. The reason why she didn't use it on the blue ball of light was that it didn't have a physical body. The old tachi groaned as it couldn't bear the weight. However, this attack was formed by divine power and was quickly broken by Dojijiri Yasutsuna. Just as Deep Mountain Chio was about to recklessly go all out because of the control of the divine power, Jasmine, who had hypnotized those resurrected people to leave the exhibition hall, had already arrived by her side. Then, she slapped the face of the newly ascended god. Lord Emoli! Asahi Sakurakanji exclaimed in disbelief. However, Chihaya Fukuyama's eyes cleared up after being slapped by Emoli. She, who was controlled by her divine power due to her anger, held her head and looked at her hands in disbelief. However, Emoli made a cross with his arms and said with dissatisfaction, "That's not right." Chihaya Fukuyama was puzzled by Emoli's attitude. At this time, you should say, even daddy has never hit a nest. Emoli said righteously. Chapter 106. Even though Chihaya wanted to complain to Emoli, now was not the time for a casual chat. Without Chihaya's divine power, the blue orb of light once again swung its Dojijiri Yasutsuna towards Sakurakanji. Chihaya, who had just ascended to godhood, no longer had the luxury of freely manipulating her divine power after her anger dissipated. Even though she was burning with anxiety, there was nothing she could do to help. What made her even more anxious was that, at some point in time, Jasmine had already sat cross-legged on one of the exhibition tables and was calmly eating the chicken roll from earlier. Judging from the smell, it was still a chicken roll, but soon, Chihaya understood why Emoli was not nervous at all. Just as the blue orb of light was about to touch Sakurakanji, a figure appeared between the girl and the orb of light and casually kicked the Dojijiri Yasutsuna away. As a result, the lump of blue light could only bitterly disappear again and pick up the Japanese national treasure tachi again. Su Shinshin waved at Chihaya, who had become extremely chunibyu due to the awakening of his divine power. Since when did you start wearing contact lenses? After that, he carefully studied the girl's current appearance and showed a slightly surprised expression. At first, Chihaya thought that he had finally realized that she had become a god, but then the girl realized that she was overthinking it. Let's be honest, our protagonist said with a serious face. Golden contact lenses don't match blue. I think if you want to play with heterochromatic eyes, orange and green are better. Qianzhao suddenly had a feeling of, will all gods become as unreliable as this guy in the end? And, is it too late to turn back into a human? And, it's too late to regret. At this time, Han Yuan, who had been left behind by Su Shinshin, ran in with sweat dripping down her face. But looking at her panting, she probably would not be able to use spells before she caught her breath. Lord God, that thing's target seems to be me, Asahi Sakurakanji, who was behind Su Shinshin, whispered. Yes, that's true, Su Shinshin nodded. Its target was not Chihaya from the beginning but you. What? Asahi Sakurakanji widened his eyes and looked at the blue orb of light not far away. What is it? About this point we have to start from 400 years ago. At that time, a famous incident happened in Japan. You should have heard of it. Su Shinshin glanced at the orb of light and saw that it did not attack. Instead, it was holding its breath and preparing to unleash a killing move. Thinking that this guy's life was not much different from a candle in the wind, Su Shinshin began to explain. Do you know what happened? 400 years ago, that is, around 1600 AD. Chihaya, who was good at history, thought for a moment and had a clue. Did the Battle of Guanyuan happen? What's that? Su Shinshing looked confused. Well, it seems that it's not that. Is it the duel on Rockflow Island? Asahi Sakurakanji clasped his hands and said what he thought. The duel on Rockflow Island, in short, was a story of how the genius swordsman Sasaki Kojiro was killed by the grassroots swordsman Miyamoto Musashi, causing the latter to become famous. Because various versions of the story were widely spread, there was no need to say too much here. Yes, that's it. Su Shinshing snapped his fingers. I used my contacts, physics, in Japan to look up some secret information and found something very interesting. After Sasaki Kojiro died, a disciple who learned swordsmanship from him went to Rockflow Island and took away Captain Hiku, Sasaki Kojiro's Odachi, and buried his body on the Thousand Attraction Rock that is said to lead to Yoshimi Yamasaka. About 50 years later, there was a sudden change in Yoshimi Yamasaka in Japan. Imperial Thunder God left Takamagara and went to Yoshimi Yamasaka to check it out. However, there was no news from him. Not long after, a monster that had never appeared in the history of Japan came out of Yoshimi Yamasaka and caused havoc in the human world. At that time, in order to cover up the truth, the Yin-Yang Shirtao had to create an earthquake, and then all the consequences caused by the monster were blamed on the low-magnitude earthquake. Su Shinshing said slowly. As he spoke, the blue ball of light seemed to become anxious, and blue lightning began to flash on its surface from time to time. In the end, the monster was sealed back to the Thousand Attraction Rock by several great gods of Takamagara. Because of this, the spiritual power of Takamagara was exhausted. In order not to sink to the bottom of the sea, they could only pull it into the divine kingdom, causing the gods of Japan to completely fade out of the human world. Hearing Su Shinshing's words, Sakurakanji couldn't help but ask, Goddess-sama, does this have anything to do with our current situation? Of course, because the White Bell Island is the legendary Thousand Attraction Rock, and the monster in front of us is the monster that was sealed in the dry well. Su Shinshing smiled and looked at the blue ball of light. No, to be precise, it is the resentful spirit of Sasaki Kojiro who devoured Imperial Thunder God, right? What? Chihaya showed an expression of disbelief. Whether it was Sasaki Kojiro or Imperial Thunder God, they were all well-known existences in Japan. He didn't expect to face an enemy of this level this time. Indeed, at this time, Hanakeiwan Yuyuan finally caught his breath. Only the legendary swordsman and the mythical god of war can control 2 of the 5 swords of the world at the same time without being devoured. No, according to the information I got from my connections, physics, this guy has not only 2 of the 5 swords of the world, but all 5 of them. He didn't take them out now just to mislead us. When we really fight later, he can use those swords to attack us. As if to confirm Su Shinshing's words, the blue ball of light suddenly grew several new arms, each holding a long sword with powerful power and killing intent. Ordinary people would feel a little cold at most when they saw these swords, but people with spirit vision could easily see the thick resentful spirits and death aura wrapped around these swords. There was absolutely no chance of winning. When he saw the terrifying swords, Chihaya felt his scalp tingle and deeply felt this at the same time. Unless one had a weapon of the same level, just by touching those swords, one's soul would receive a considerable amount of damage. The reason why the few people that Jasmine had resurrected looked so sluggish, other than being hypnotized, was probably also because of this. Not only Chihaya, but even Hanakeiwan also felt the difference in power between them. It wasn't the kind of difference that could be made up by numbers, but it was like the gap between heaven and earth, an insurmountable gap. The grudge that was strong enough to devour Fuso's main god-level gods, the power of the 2 divine rights of thunder and war that came from the royal thunder god, the weapons that could kill the 3 great monsters, and there were 5 of them, and the sword skills that had already surpassed the limits of humans. They couldn't win, or rather, they couldn't even escape. Hey, what do you think we should do now? Chihaya whispered to Su Shinshing. What else can we do? Su Shinshing spread his hands. After killing him, we go home and eat. How nervous was this guy? Chihaya felt like she expected better from him. But at this time, Su Shinshing was no longer talking to her. Instead, he slowly walked toward the opponent under Chihaya's nervous and worried gaze. "Aren't you going to attack me? Oh, it seems that you're more sensitive than I thought. You've already noticed that the protection on Sakura Kanji was my work." Every time Su Xinxing took a step forward, the ball of light would subtly retreat a little. The people around Sakura Kanji were nothing to this monster, but Su Xinxing's protection almost killed it last time. The reason why it stole the 5 swords of the world and Imperial Thunder God's Futsu Mitama instead of taking back its former captain, Futsu Mitama, was that it felt that its power couldn't defeat Su Xinxing. However, it didn't expect that even though it had mastered the power of Japan, it still didn't have the courage to face Su Xinxing. Even when it faced Miyamoto Musashi when it was alive, and when it faced Imperial Thunder God after death, it didn't feel this kind of pressure. Who on earth is this young man with little hair? If this continued, its momentum would soon be completely worn down by Su Xinxing. At that time, it wouldn't even have a chance to fight. So when it saw Su Xinxing continue to walk toward it, it finally made up its mind. It waved the 5 swords of the world and hid the Futsu Mitama. It wanted to use the power of these divine weapons to injure or even kill Su Xinxing. Su Xinxing didn't seem to see the opponent's murderous look at all. He still walked forward leisurely until he passed by the opponent. At that moment, the sparkling and translucent sword light flashed in his hand, but disappeared in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, the ancient vengeful spirit that had devoured the gods stood there motionlessly. A moment later, the national treasures of Japan were all broken into 3 pieces, and the resentful spirit gradually faded and disappeared. It wasn't killed by Su Xinxing, but because it saw the real unparalleled sword that it couldn't learn even if it reincarnated countless times, so it felt satisfied enough to become a Buddha. In this way, the monster in the dry well was finally solved. The part of the soul in Asahi Sakurakanji's body should be fine. Chihaya Fukuyama had also been promoted to a god, and the things that he came to Japan to do were finished. Su Xinxing looked back at the stunned girls. Emily was dozing off next to him, and then he stretched himself. It was almost time to go home. Chapter 107. To make a long story short, Wu Yejin was a lesbian. Well, to sum it up, it seemed to be a bit of an imperial decision, but that was the truth. Because Wu Yejin's father was busy with work, coupled with some careless education, there were some deviations in Wu Yejin's growth. But this wasn't a big problem. After understanding that there was something wrong with the girl she liked, Wu Yejin didn't reveal this in front of others. She just pretended to be a normal person and lived an ordinary life among ordinary people. Then, for some reason, Wu Yejin's family business exploded. Originally, it was just a transportation company, but now Wu Yejin's family stepped into the threshold of the upper class. She didn't know if it was to make up for the fact that he didn't care much about Wu Yi in the past, but after Wu Ye's father became rich, he wasn't stingy with Wu Yi at all. He was quite generous, and even the school was changed from a public school to an aristocratic school. But because of this, Wu Yejin fell into a situation where she was isolated by her classmates. After all, she used to live in a public school, so she definitely couldn't adapt to entering an aristocratic school. Many of her ordinary actions were seen as a symbol of a country bumpkin by her classmates. For example, in the aristocratic school, as long as the students sat down, they could order food just like in a restaurant. Only Wu Yejin still foolishly ran to the counter. Another example was that the aristocratic school had some courses such as economics and management that the public school didn't teach. Wu Yejin, who had zero foundation, was confused. Another example was that the aristocratic school had a cafe and maids who prepared afternoon tea and cakes for the students. And when the ignorant Wu Yejin was asked what snacks she wanted, she subconsciously said hamburger. In short, because of these things, the girl was bullied by her classmates who looked down on her background. This also caused the originally lively and cheerful Wu Yejin to gradually become taciturn. But Wu Yejin was a good child. Even if she was treated unfairly at school, she didn't mention these things when she returned home. She only told Wu Yejin what she saw in the aristocratic school. This was because she knew that her father had exhausted his mental and physical strength in order to maintain the operation of the company that had suddenly expanded. Even his hair had turned white. This made the girl decide not to let her father worry about her unnecessarily. The pressure in school and the forced smiles at home gradually overwhelmed the young girl. Every day after school, she would hide in the park alone, sitting on the old swing and staring blankly at the distant sky. He would only return home when the sun was setting and lie that he was participating in a club activity. No matter how careless Father Wuye was, he noticed that his daughter was getting more and more haggard. However, Wuye Jin had never complained about anything. She was always smiling at home. Even if he asked her what happened, she would not say anything. She would only shake her head. Even if he wanted to help, he did not know where to start. Just when Wu Yejin felt that she couldn't take it anymore, a young girl appeared in her line of sight. It was a physical education class. The teacher asked the students to prepare in pairs. Wu Yejin, who was privately called a country bumpkin, was naturally pushed to the side and could only stand alone. But at this time, a beautiful girl stood out from Class A, who was in the same physical education class as her class. She didn't avoid suspicion and invited her to form a team. "My name is Mizuki Takemiya. If you don't mind, why don't we form a team?" Until now, Wu Yejin still remembered the girl's smile and gentle words when she reached out her hand to her. It was after that color once again appeared in her originally pale world. After class, Wu Yejin understood the identity of the girl who reached out her hand to her from the conversations of the other students. Mizuki Takemiya, the eldest daughter of the illustrious Fei Gong family, was different from Wu Yejin's small family. It was one of the oldest families in Fusang. Even in this aristocratic school, there weren't many people who could be compared to her in terms of status. And yet, such a noble and beautiful person was able to ignore the gossip around her and reach out to her. From that moment on, Wu Yejin began to look forward to this older sister who was 1 year older than her. She set her as a goal and began to work hard to enrich herself. Wu Yejin's father, who was originally worried about his daughter, saw that she had suddenly pulled herself together and was slightly relieved. Since then, Wu Yejin would always run to Class A of the upper grades, even if it was just to take a look at her. Mizuki Takemiya also accepted her as a junior who looked forward to her and would take care of her in various ways. As the school's idol, Mizuki Takemiya had done so, and as time passed, the other students in the school naturally accepted Wu Yejin. Although occasionally there would be people who were jealous of Mizuki Takemiya, but under Wu Yejin's own hard work, her talent and hard work made the young girl stand out and finally became an outstanding student who was recognized by the other students. Then time flew and Mizuki Takemiya was about to graduate from that aristocratic school and move to a place called Huanghua Academy. Wu Yejin naturally decided to follow her footsteps and head to the school on that isolated island. But before that, they would not be able to meet for at least a year. Hence, Wu Yejin made up her mind, and on the day before Mizuki Takemiya's graduation, she called her to the park where she had always been alone and confessed to her under the cherry blossom tree. At that time, it would be a lie to say that she wasn't afraid. Wu Yejin was afraid that the other party would think that she was a pervert who liked girls and wouldn't bother about her anymore. That would be even more painful than killing her. But Mizuki Takemiya quietly listened to Wu Yejin's stuttering confession, and then with a gentle smile that never changed, he gently stroked Wu Yejin's hair. "I'm sorry, I'm still not too sure about the feeling of liking someone, so I'm unable to reciprocate your feelings." Saying that, Mizuki Takemiya took off his hairband and put it on Wu Yejin's head. "This will be a promise. If one day, I understand this feeling, I will definitely give you a proper reply. Of course, you must also come to Huanghua." At this moment, a warm feeling overflowed from the bottom of her heart, and Wu Yejin once again felt her own feelings. As expected, she liked this person. Hence, in the year when Mizuki Takemiya was not around, Wu Yejin invested all her energy into her studies and did not rely on Wu Yejin's father's connections. Instead, she purely passed the gifted student assessment and entered Huanghua Academy with her own strength. Then, with her most brilliant smile, she went to meet the person she loved the most. "Sister Feigong, I'm here." Chapter 108. Things started from a few days ago. As Phoenix Academy's Student Union President and Sister Feigong's fan club president, Wu Yejin had many things to do even after she returned home. But unlike usual, today she was sitting on a cute pink bubble chair, working late into the night for the student union's work. Wu Yejin couldn't help but be distracted when she was handling documents. She recalled the intermittent conversation she heard at the White Bell Shrine during the afternoon break. She didn't expect that the usually pure and noble Chihaya Fukuyama was actually such a person, and what's more, she was just too daring. Wait a minute, could it be because she was usually too repressed that when there was no one looking at her, she would become so daring? Wu Yejin's little face flushed red. She covered her face with both hands and felt as though there was a stream of hot air slowly coming out. A suspicious pink color also surfaced in her mind. But soon after, she shook her head hard and threw the spring-like imagination out of her mind, trying her best to calm down. As expected, compared to Chihaya Fukuyama, Sister Feigong was the perfect one. Once again strengthening her belief in being a Yuri, the young lady once again focused her attention on the documents in front of her. But before she could write a few lines, her thoughts once again flew to other places. She wondered how the little animal she picked up on the mountain was doing. Although at that time she took the opportunity during the afternoon break to send the little animal to the nearby pet hospital, but she didn't expect that even the experienced and knowledgeable old Chinese medicine doctor, the specialist couldn't recognize what kind of animal it was. The treatment could only be done on an ordinary pet. And Wu Yejin somehow felt that after the specialist did a little test on the little animal, his expression when he looked at the little animal had a, "As long as I dissect it for research, the next Nobel Prize in biology will be mine." Inexplicable meaning. Could it be that the next time she saw it, that pitiful little thing would have already been turned into a specimen? Although she was a little worried, but Wu Yejin knew that no matter how she thought, she couldn't change anything. She could only sigh and try her best to concentrate on the work on hand as soon as possible. After finishing her work and homework a little later than usual, the young lady went to the bathroom to take a shower. After washing up, the clock had already struck 12, but she was still the only one in the empty villa. Dad isn't coming back tonight? After the 5-leaf transportation group developed, this was already a common occurrence. However, 5-leaf Jinx always felt a little lonely. If only senior Sister Feigong was here. Of course, this was just wishful thinking. As the president of Sister Feigong's fan club, Jean was very clear that Mizuki Takemiya almost didn't stay outside. As if she wanted to drive away her loneliness, Violet stretched lazily and deliberately spoke loudly. "Forget it, let's sleep." Division line. In the wee hours of the morning, the young girl suddenly woke up from her dream and sat up on the bed. She was sweating profusely and looked around with some lingering fear. What he saw was still the familiar room of his own. The strange sound from her dream seemed to still linger in her ears. "Save me. Please save me," someone was calling for help. No, this was not a dream. Even now, Wu Yejin felt that she could faintly hear the voice calling for help. What was going on? She took a deep breath and quickly got out of bed to change into Huanghua's school uniform. She was still the only one in the villa. She patted her cheeks, took her wallet and keys, and quickly left the villa. She ran in the direction of the faint cry for help. She naturally knew that it was very dangerous for a girl to walk on the street in the middle of the night. Encountering such an obvious strange incident made Jean feel even more uneasy. However, she just couldn't let go of the people who called her for help. This habit had been there ever since Mizuki Takemiya saved her, and she couldn't change it. This was also the main reason why the students of Huanghua liked to call her Puppy Dog Sauce. But at the same time, they respected the student council president from the bottom of their hearts, who didn't seem to have any dignity at all. Of course, it would be better if he could restrain his fanaticism towards Big Sister Feigong a little. This way? Perhaps it was because they were getting closer to their destination, the originally faint and intermittent sounds became clearer. Finally, the girl suddenly found herself at the pet hospital where the strange little animal was placed. At this time, the door of the hospital should have been locked, but it was wide open. Wu Yejin carefully walked into the hospital, but found that the patrolling security guards in the hospital were lying on the ground in the lobby. She didn't know if they were dead or alive. The girl covered her mouth and barely suppressed her scream. She quickly approached the people lying on the ground. After hesitating for a moment, she reached out to check their breathing. She found that these people were not dead, but just fainted. This discovery made the girl feel a lot more relieved. Then she continued to walk inside, but soon she noticed that something was wrong. It was too quiet here. If it was a human hospital, it would be normal for it to be quiet at night, but this was a pet hospital. There were many animals in the care. Many animals would be inexplicably excited at night, such as huskies, so it shouldn't be so quiet. What's more, she was an outsider, so the dogs that were awake should bark at least twice. The girl hesitated for a moment, opened the door of a foster room, and found that almost all the animals inside were awake, but at the moment they were all shivering. A few huskies even covered their heads with their paws to pretend to be moles. Not to mention barking, they didn't even dare to make a sound. This strange situation made the girl's heart, which was originally a little relaxed, become tense again. She continued to move closer to the sound of the cry for help, and finally came to the door of the room where the little animal was placed. The cry for help came from inside. In addition, there seemed to be some other sounds inside, but they were all covered by the cry for help. The girl carefully opened the door, and then saw the scene inside. This was the only office that was still brightly lit. A young man was sitting on the desk, his left hand on the desk, and his right hand was holding a snow-white tail. That's right, it was the little animal that was hanging upside down on his right hand. I was still thinking about how to go to Takamagara. I didn't expect you to come down like this. Good job, now tell me how to go. The young man said to the little animal. I refuse. The little animal answered rather straightforwardly. So the young man shook his hand that was holding the little animal's tail, and the fragile little animal was immediately swung in a circle, and the whole person, animal, screamed with the Doppler effect and moved in a circular motion. You do this kind of evil thing without saying anything? After finally stopping, the little white animal was already dizzy. It's not evil. Our protagonist showed a very scary smile in the eyes of others. It's just a connection, physics. Chapter 109. Wu Yejin frowned slightly as she hid behind the door. The male voice inside was strangely familiar to her. Then, she suddenly remembered that this was the man who was with Chihaya Fukuyama at the Shiranui shrine during the afternoon. Please save me. Although the white creature's tail was grabbed by the man and it seemed to be bickering with him, its voice continued to enter Jin's mind. It was a very strange feeling, just like telepathy. In the end, Wu Yejin did not dare to rush out. Instead, she tried to ask the voice in her mind. What should I do? What? She had only asked the question without much expectation, but she didn't expect the voice to really answer her. Try to attract his attention, and I'll be able to escape with you. Wu Yejin peeked through the door and glanced at the white creature that the man was still playing with like a toy. It did not seem convincing at all, however. She only hesitated for a moment before sneaking into the room next to the corridor. She found a heavy metal medical device and threw it out of the room without caring what it was. Wu was quite lucky. She heard the sound of the device hitting something outside. Judging from the sound, it was probably a flower pot. Since the hospital courtyard was relatively quiet, the sound was very ear-piercing. As expected, the young man instinctively stood up and looked into the courtyard. The white creature took this opportunity to escape from the young man's hands and ran to the room where Wu Yi was. Hold on to me, the little creature shouted. When Wu Yi heard the footsteps outside the door, she, who had no other choice, could only follow the little creature's instructions and wrap her hands tightly around its waist like she was hugging a puppy. The little creature stood up and raised a magic staff that appeared out of nowhere. It looked like a magic staff from a magical girl anime and shouted, "Burrow, burrow, burrow me." Wait, why do I feel like there's something wrong with this spell? Although she had never watched Journey to the West, she instinctively complained. However, in the next instant, a bluish-purple light erupted from the staff, catching Wu Yi off guard. The light was so dazzling that it turned the entire room into a vast expanse of white. The surrounding environment began to distort as if it had been thrown into a mirror. Then, it began to move like a television image. TSK, did he escape? You're a genius. The man's voice became softer and softer. And that girl just now, could she be? At this moment, Wu Yejin suddenly realized that she and the white creature were no longer in the hospital. Instead, they were in a tunnel that was constantly changing. All kinds of strange colors turned into streams of light, leaving strange marks on the surrounding walls, but they all disappeared in the end. Even though Wu Yi couldn't feel any movement in the air, he could sense that he and the white creature were moving forward quickly. After an unknown amount of time, the surrounding colors disappeared, returning to darkness. Soon after, Wu Yi discovered that the feeling of moving forward had disappeared. In its place was a sense of weightlessness, or rather, a sense of falling. When the wind blew past her ears, she finally realized that she was indeed falling. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Because it was too sudden, the girl didn't even have time to scream. She could only hug the white creature tightly and let out a weak cry. In the end, she and the white creature fell into the water with a splash. Fortunately, Wu Yi knew how to swim. When she went to the swimming pool in the past, she tried diving out of curiosity. Therefore, after a brief moment of panic, she immediately poked her head out of the water and desperately breathed in the fresh air. It was only then that she had the time to observe her current environment. The sky had turned from night to day. From the angle of the sun, it was probably close to noon. She was now in a freshwater river that wasn't too big. Fortunately, the river was deep enough that she was fine after falling from such a high place. Oh no, that animal! When she noticed that her hands were empty, Wu Yi immediately panicked. However, she soon heard the man's voice beside her. Oh, thanks to you, I was able to escape from that guy. Anyway, thank you in advance. Wu Yejin turned her head in the direction of the voice and saw that the white creature was floating beside her. Although it tried its best to look elegant, its dog-paddling movements completely wasted its efforts. So, can you explain the ins and outs of the whole thing now? The five-leaf pansy swam to the shore and squeezed its clothes dry while asking the white creature that was shaking its fur and throwing water jets at it. Of course, please allow me to start from the beginning. By the way, little girl, how much do you know about Japanese mythology? The white creature didn't remember to start the story. Instead, it asked a question. Ordinary people should know about it, right? I might as well have read the records of ancient events once. Because she didn't know why the white creature asked this question, Wu Yejin didn't say too much. That's much more convenient. Kojiji should have a story about Susanoo. Oh, Susanoo, right? Well, I remember that he made a bet with Amaterasu Amikami and then went to Takamagara. As a result, because he caused trouble there, not only did he annoy Amaterasu Amikami, but he was also chased out of Takamagara. After that, he killed Yamada no Orochi and settled in the Cloud Nation. Wu Yejin briefly explained what she remembered. Oh, isn't that very clear? But myths and legends revised by ordinary people will always have some errors and omissions. In fact, Susanoo was killed in Takamagara, and the people who went to the mortal world to kill Yamada no Orochi were just others who borrowed his name. The white creature calmly told the truth behind the myth. No wonder Susanoo in the story felt like a completely different person when he was in Takamagara and when he came to the mortal world. Wu Yejin was a little surprised and suddenly understood. After all, in the story, Susanoo, who went to Takamagara, not only destroyed the fields and ditches of Takamagara, but he even went to the roof of the shrine to take a dump when Amaterasu tasted new grains. Finally, he threw the zebra's horse skin into the weaving room, causing the death of a weaving girl. He was a complete evil embryo. But after he was chased out of the mortal world, he changed into a heroic man who killed Yamada no Orochi for the sake of the people. By the way, the person who killed Susanoo and used his name to kill Yamada no Orochi was the man you saw in the hospital just now. Then, the white creature calmly told an even more shocking fact. Chapter 110. Just kidding. Five Leaves gasped in disbelief. Susanoo and Yamada no Orochi are mythical creatures, right? That's a long time ago, isn't it? That man has lived for so long. I sense the aura of a god on him. Maybe he became a god after he died. After all, he was so powerful. It's not surprising that he could do something like that. The white creature replied nonchalantly. Then what are you? A civet cat that can talk? Wu Yejin looked down at the white creature licking her fur and asked curiously. Civet cat? Little girl, you're really interesting. The white creature sighed, then twisted its body flexibly. I also feel that this appearance is not very convenient. I'd better change my appearance. As soon as the white creature finished speaking, Wu Yejin felt like she heard the sound of a balloon bursting. Then, the white creature disappeared and was replaced by a large white parrot. Then let me reintroduce myself. I'm also a god of Takamajahar. You can call me Bankai Tion. The parrot flapped its wings and said in a voice that was almost the same as before. You mean Bankai Tion of the 7 blessings? 5 Leaves asked. Yes, although it's just a nickname, it's not wrong. The parrot nodded. Wow, so the gods and the myths all exist. By the way, I remember that Bankai Tion is a goddess. After wringing her clothes dry, 5 Leaves found a dry lawn by the shore and sat on it to rest. At the same time, she tilted her head in confusion. Although her underwear was still wet, she couldn't take it off and wring it dry in this situation. That's my original form. But if I change back to my original form here, I'll be discovered by the Amaterasu Amikami of this era. The parrot explained. 5 Leaves grasped the key point of the parrot's words. This era. Hey, didn't I say that? We're now in the mythical era of Fuso. Eh? Seeing the girl's shocked expression, Bankai Tion patted her head with her wings. Sorry for making you confused. Anyway, I'll start from the beginning. And this time, I need your help. Parrot's explanation. In the mythological era, an uninvited guest from another world suddenly appeared in Takamajihara. Although the gods were shocked at first, they didn't pay much attention to him after realizing that he didn't have any ill intentions. He was just looking for a way back. Until the vicious Susanoo started doing more and more evil deeds in Takamajihara, angering the visitor from another world. Thus, the visitor decided to kill him. Amaterasu Amikami took pity on her brother and ordered the gods to stop him. As a result, the gods who relied on their numbers were defeated by the visitor from another world, and Susanoo was killed in the hall of the shrine. Amaterasu Amikami was terrified by this and hid in Amanawato. Although she was able to return to Takamagara and restore the sun's orbit because of Amaterasu Amikami's Kagura, she was still filled with regret for her brother's death. So, not long before Wu Yejin and the others returned to this era, Amaterasu Amikami ordered Kenyu Raikami to steal Izanagi's treasure, Heavenly Jasper, and hand it over to her. Kenyu Raikami was seriously injured because of stealing the treasure and disappeared while investigating something in the lower realm. But at that time, Amaterasu Amikami had already entered a very paranoid state. After obtaining the Heavenly Jasper, she forcibly imprisoned the ancient god Maji Askebe and Amaterasu Tsunari, and used the Heavenly Jasper to steal the divine power of these two gods. She forcibly changed history and changed the entrance of the visitor from Takamajihara to Fuso's human world. In her mind, as long as she could educate Susanoo, relying on the power of history to correct things, the final result should not be too different from the present. The only difference was that her brother survived. However, the development of things was completely different from what she expected. The existence of the person from another world was too incredible, and the power of history could not reproduce what he did. In the end, there was a conflict between the two different futures, and the law of cause and effect was also chaotic. Soon, Takamajihara and even the entire Fuso would be destroyed because of this. At this time, Amaterasu Amikami, who finally woke up, had no other choice but to ask for help from Fuso's oldest god, Amaterasu Amikami. Although the latter knew that everything was caused by Amaterasu Amikami's actions, he could only choose to help for Fuso and Takamajihara. However, even he had no way to interfere with the actions of the visitor from another world. Therefore, after the 5 being gods had a discussion, they decided to place their power on the Jade Tree of Heaven, and then ordered Bankai to find a suitable candidate to go with the other party to bring the visitor from another world who appeared in the human world of Fuso back to Takamajihara, and kill Susanoo again to correct the mistakes that occurred in history. End of explanation. That's about it. As soon as the parrot finished speaking, the girl grabbed it and said, "So, the suitable person is me." "Yes, that's right, because you can hear my voice. What have you all done without my permission?" "Ah," the girl screamed, "and if you want to kill that Susanoo again, why don't you just bring the person who caught you back to this era?" "It can't be done. It doesn't matter if it's beneficial or harmful, all spells, divine power, and authority are useless against that guy from another world. Even Tamatere-sama, who has absorbed the power of the two Tenjin great gods, can only attack the entrance that he used to cross into this world. Then don't get me involved. Before this, I was just an ordinary high school girl who loved Wani-sama." Wu Yejin shook the parrot in her hand. "I'm going to die. I'm going to be strangled to death." Bankai, who was being held by the neck, struggled to break free from the girl's hand. He flew to a tree by the river and looked down at Wu Yejin, saying, "We don't want you to work for free. As long as you can complete our request, we can help you fulfill your wish. Don't think that the power of the Tianjin gods is greater than that of ordinary gods. We will do what we say. I don't need something as illusory as gods to help me fulfill my dreams." Wu Yejin bared her cute canine teeth and waved her fist at the parrot angrily. "Really? Then I'll say something first. The plane that the person you love is on has an accident. If it's the power of the other gods, even if it doesn't happen in the territory of Fusang, they can still interfere. At least, they can ensure her survival." The parrot, "No." Bankai looked at Wu Yejin, who was staring at him under the tree, and said slowly, "Are you really going to give up on the person you love?" "What? Tamatere-sama?" Wu Yejin's legs went soft and she knelt on the grass, her mind in a mess. For the sake of Tamatere-sama's words. After a while, she sorted out her thoughts and looked at the parrot with a determined gaze. "Okay, I promise you. What should I do now?" "In short, use this first." The parrot pointed at the wand-like thing on the grass with its claws. "Transform into a magical girl." Note, the 7 gods are Dahei, Ebisu, Vishaman, Bankai, Fulashu, Shou-Lao, some say it's auspicious, and Bude monk. Except for Ebisu, Dahei, and Bankai, the others are gods from the Celestial Empire or were inspired by the Celestial Empire. Bankai, also known as Bankai, is from Hinduism. Chapter 111. Putting aside the strange magical girl transformation ability for the time being, Pansy confirmed her current mission. To put it simply, she had to bring the so-called visitor from another world to Takamajihara. Although it seemed troublesome, in reality, only the parrot knew where the visitor would land. Since 5 Leaves and the others had transmigrated to this world about an hour before the visitor arrived, all they had to do now was to wait for the visitor to arrive. As for how to get to Takamajihara, the parrot had a ready-made guide as an original resident of Takamajihara. Come to think of it, it wasn't as difficult as she had imagined. The difficult part is communicating with him. "Don't worry about that." Wu Yejin patted her barren chest. "I'm the student council president of Huanghua after all. I have to communicate with many people every day. I'm already familiar with this kind of thing." Being able to act had always been a girl's strength. After confirming this, she immediately asked the parrot to bring her to the place where the visitor from another world would land. Perhaps they had considered this when they transmigrated. The river where 5 Leaves and the others had fallen into was not too far away from the visitor's landing point. Even if they walked, it would only take about half an hour. The place where the visitor from another world was going to land was a forest full of bushes. However, the trees were sparse, so it was still convenient for them to move around. All we have to do now is to wait. 5 Leaves found a tree stump, brushed off the dead leaves on it, and sat on the left side of her face as she asked in boredom. "That's right. But are you really not going to consider transforming into a magical girl? We used a lot of references to the works of the humans on the surface. It took us a lot of effort to make Jewel of Heaven look like this." The parrot raised its magic wand and tried to persuade her again. "You're all using anime as references. And they're all magical girl anime. That's too extreme. Let me tell you, after transforming into a magical girl, not only will your body be greatly improved, You'll also have many special abilities. The parrot was not discouraged and continued to persuade her. For example, the transformation will take about 30 seconds, but no matter what kind of enemy you face, you won't attack during the transformation. Also, although your appearance won't change much after the transformation, other people will have symptoms of cognitive impairment. Even your parents and best friends won't be able to recognize you. In addition, there's also a 100% chance of being attacked by tentacles. I definitely won't transform. Time passed by as the two of them chatted happily. After waiting for a while, something strange happened. All the colors in the surrounding scenery seemed to have begun to distort. Many colorful spots of light appeared out of thin air and rotated in midair, finally forming a rainbow-like halo. In the next moment, the light blended together and turned into a white light that suddenly lit up. Quintana could not help but cover her eyes. Even so, she could inexplicably feel that something had emerged from the white light. The whole world seemed to be trembling because of the visitor. The light dissipated, and a figure appeared there. The girl lowered her hand that was covering her eyes and confirmed the other party's appearance. That's right, it was the guy who had a strange interaction with Chihaya Fukuyama at the White Bell Shrine and caught the debater in the hospital. However, compared to the man who was old enough to be called an uncle, the man in front of him was clearly much younger. He was about the same age as the Fifth Leaf himself. Even if he were to be called a teenager, it wouldn't be strange. His hair was also much thicker than the middle-aged man's. Also, unlike the middle-aged man's frivolous expression, the teenager's expression was more serious and gloomy, and his eyes were more ferocious. Also, unlike the cheap t-shirt and colorful Hawaiian beach pants, he was wearing a finely crafted, European-style metal armor. Although he did not have a helmet, the armor was decorated with gilded patterns. He carried a total of 5 long swords on his back and waist, and each of the blades and gauntlets looked quite magnificent. At this moment, the visitor from the other world was in a state of confusion. He half knelt on the ground and covered his forehead with his hand. His face was gloomy as he gritted his teeth and whispered, "Damn it, they set up such a trap in the underground city? Is this a world of illusion? There's an illusion that can trick me. The last of the 4 heavenly kings is indeed much stronger than the previous 4. You're finally here." Wu Yi was already impatient. Or rather, he was dizzy from the persuasion of the parrot. He did not realize how reckless he was. He jumped down from the tree stump and said, "Do you want to leave this place? I can help." "Little girl, you're too direct." Shocked by the girl's action, Debate wanted to stop her, but it was too late. "So, it's you who did this?" The teenager Su Shenxing raised his head and glared at Fifth Leaf fiercely. This made the girl a little timid for a moment, but when she remembered that the imperial concubine was waiting for her to save, she immediately gathered her courage and said, "No, I'm just an ordinary human. I mean, if you do as I say, you can go back to where you want to go." In the next moment, Fifth Leaf felt that her vision was tilted. However, she immediately realized that something was wrong because half of a body without an upper body appeared in front of her. The scattered organs and blood stained the ground of the shrubs red. The burning sensation in her abdomen made Wu Yejin realize that it was her own body. What happened? What happened at that moment? For a moment, the girl's mind went blank and she could not understand. "Sorry, compared to the suspicious person who tried to command me, I trust the sword in my hand more." At this moment, the teenager's cold voice sounded, "In a place like the buried city, it would be strange if an ordinary human appeared." Fifth Leaf tried her best to look at the teenager and saw that he was looking at her coldly. His empty hand had unsheathed a long sword from his back. A drop of blood dripped from the tip of the long sword. At this moment, Wu Yejin finally understood that she had been cut in half by the teenager at a speed that could not be seen by the naked eye. "This must be a joke. This is not what we agreed on. How am I supposed to communicate with such a violent person? No, my consciousness is fading. Am I going to die?" The burning sensation in her abdomen turned into excruciating pain, but the girl did not even have the strength to scream. All that was left was the fear of death. Then, her vision was shrouded in darkness. Wu Yejin, dead. Chapter 112. So this is what death feels like? It was pitch black, and the surroundings were cold to the touch. It was impossible to breathe, as if he was drowning. Wait, drowning? Cough, cough. The girl suddenly broke the surface of the water and coughed. Then she looked at the scene around her in surprise. It was the river after she was brought to the mythological era by the parrot. Then she did not bother to climb ashore. She just lifted the hem of her clothes. There was her smooth and white lower abdomen. There were no internal organs and blood flowing out after being cut in half. There were no white bones. Her body was still intact. Is that a dream? The girl put down her clothes and muttered in disbelief. Unfortunately, it is not. Debater, who had turned into a parrot, answered her. Its voice sounded a little helpless. You were indeed killed by that otherworldly visitor. Then what the hell is going on? Wu Yejin was emotional and shouted at the parrot with an expression that looked like she was about to collapse. But it was not her fault. Anyone who was killed inexplicably would not be able to calm down. Well, before I answer your question, are you sure you don't want to come up from the river? You will catch a cold. This kind of thing is not. Chew. As if to confirm the parrot's guess, the girl was interrupted by a sneeze. She bit her lip with a slightly red face and reluctantly walked ashore. Then she sat down and began to wring her clothes. Let's start from the beginning. Didn't I say before that the reason why we can return to this era is because of the power of the 5 otherworldly gods? So in fact, there are 5 powers in this celestial jewel. The first power brought us to this era, and then to fulfill your wish, we need to reserve another power for you to return to the original era. In addition, there are 2 more powers. These 2 powers are given to you as insurance. Once you die, the insurance will be triggered and you will return to a specific point in time. The parrot sighed rather humanly. I didn't tell you at first because I was afraid that you would be careless if you knew about this mechanism. But who knew that even if you didn't know about this insurance, you would still die? It's because that guy is so violent. Speaking of which, this quest was basically impossible to complete. Let those guys who don't even blink when they kill follow us. Or rather, even if I could, I don't want to move with those murderers. Wu Yi grumbled in frustration. In short, you should try to be cautious when you talk to him this time. The parrot didn't argue with her about whether it was Su Xinxing or the world that was wrong. It just suggested. No. The girl firmly refused. I don't want to communicate with that kind of guy. When Wu Yi thought about how his opponent was a cold-blooded murderer who would kill anyone he sensed that something was wrong, he felt the terror of having his heart clenched and his blood frozen. She stood up and walked in the opposite direction of where the otherworldly visitors were about to land. Anyway, there must be other ways to correct the deviation of history. Hey, I said, now is not the time to throw a tantrum. The parrot hurriedly followed her and tried to persuade her. If we don't find him now, we will lose track of him later. It will be much more troublesome to find him again. Unfortunately, its persuasion failed to move the girl. In the end, the 2 of them walked all the way and left the woodland where the river was located. They came to a wide area at the foot of the mountain. Wu Yejin found traces of human beings here. There were large fields full of grain and various crisscrossed paths. In the distance, she could see human villages mainly made of thatched huts. Perhaps it was close to noon. She could vaguely see smoke rising in spirals. Do you want to go and take a rest? The parrot, who had given up on persuading the girl to find the otherworldly visitors, flew to the side and asked Wu Yi. Wu Yi hesitated. Japanese people were more civilized than the rest. There were many strange customs in various places. Whether they would welcome her or not aside, it would be bad luck if she was treated as a monster and killed. While she was hesitating, an old voice came from the paddy field not far away. Miss, what business do you have here? Wu Yejin hurriedly looked in that direction and found that the speaker was an old man who was nearly 70 years old. He was wearing ragged clothes full of patches and had a sickle in his hand. He seemed to be harvesting crops. Miss, are you talking about me? Wu Yi blinked and asked. Of course, we farmers' women are not as delicate as you. Although the clothes are strange, they are very beautiful. I have never seen that kind of cloth before. It must be a precious cloth that only exists in Heian Kyoku. Heian Kyoku seems to be a name that appeared in the Nara period, but let's treat it as ancient times. The old man bent over and said cheerfully, "Actually, we are on the way to Hupachuan." Seeing that the old man didn't seem to have any evil intentions, Wu Yejin also told him her destination. "Grandpa, have you heard of it?" Hupachuan was the name of the place told to her by the parrot. According to the parrot, there was only one way to go from the human world to Takamagara, and that was to go from the beginning of the rainbow to the divine kingdom on the Rainbow Bridge. However, the beginning of the rainbow was not fixed. It would change every few hundred years and was managed by the local dragon god. This time, the one who managed the beginning of the rainbow was the dragon god of Hupachuan. Hupachuan. I'm sorry, I don't know, but there are merchants in the village who have been to Heian Kyoku. Maybe they know. The old man thought for a moment and then replied slowly. How about this, if you don't mind, I will go with you to the village to ask. How can I? The girl waved her hand and refused. And won't this hinder your work? It's okay. The old man laughed heartily. These things are harvested at any time, but it's not every day that I can help you ask for directions. As he spoke, he seemed to be in low spirits. Also, when I look at you, I think of my daughter who passed away. I'm sorry for my rudeness. I don't mean anything bad. I hope you don't mind. It's okay. Since the old man had said so, Wu Yejin would be unreasonable if she continued to refuse. So she could only smile bitterly and said, "Then I'll leave it to you." Dividing line. After arriving at the village, the girl found that the villagers were unexpectedly kind and hospitable. When they heard that it was her first time here, they all greeted her. A few children surrounded her and asked her all kinds of questions. Even the talented parrot suffered, and several of its long tail feathers were pulled out during the chaos. She also asked the traveling merchant who claimed to have been to Heian Kyoku about the approximate location of Hupachuan. However, the merchant's somewhat shameless promotion was a little difficult for her to bear. Fortunately, before her patience ran out, the old man waved his walking stick to help her out. Although it was the first time she saw such a village, Wu Yejin felt that she did not dislike this lively place full of vitality. I'm sorry, it's been a while since outsiders came to the village, so those guys are a little overboard. The old man brought Wu Yejin to his house and said that he wanted to treat her to a meal. It's okay, I'm happy to be welcomed by all of you, the girl replied with a smile. At this time, the parrot was resting one of its wings on the wall and facing Wu Yejin with its bare tail. It seemed that the lack of tail feathers made it depressed. The old man did not live alone. There was an old woman and a young girl in the house. After knowing that the little girl was the old man's daughter, Wu Yejin could not help but sigh at the lack of entertainment at night in ancient times. At first, the little girl was a little afraid of strangers. She hid behind the old man and only revealed half of her small face to carefully look at Wu Yi. However, Wu Ye's casual movement would scare her and she would hide behind the old man. In the end, Wu Yejin could only helplessly grab the talented parrot and ignore his struggles. She treated him like a toy and let the girl play with him. Only then could she be considered to have a good relationship with the little girl. After hugging the little girl in her arms, Wu Yejin had the urge to shout, "Primary school students are amazing." Even though her heart was tied to the imperial concubine, she still had the urge to shout, "Primary school students are amazing." Calm down, Lulicons and Lullicons are not the same. The girl's rationality warned her in her mind. Wait, these two don't seem to have any conflict. The thing that interrupted Wu Yejin's train of thought and prevented her from going astray was the stew that the old woman brought over. It seemed that there were no good seasonings in this era. However, a little coarse salt, the taste of the ingredients, and the old woman's superb control of the fire were enough to make the whole dish delicious. The only pity was that although the main dish was rice, the taste was very strange. It was not quite the same as the white rice of modern times. Moreover, it was mixed with small stones and the like. After the meal, Wu Yejin was brought to the field by the little girl to play with her. They caught butterflies and frogs and so on. This made the girl feel as if she had returned to her childhood. Originally, The parrot would have jumped out to stop the girl from wasting time like this. However, before the meal, the little girl played with it until it was satisfied. The whole afternoon, it lay in the corner and rested. After dark, unlike in the city, in this era where there was no light pollution, one could clearly see the stars in the sky. Lying on the soft grass and looking up at the sky, the magnificent Milky Way and the crazy fun she had in the afternoon eased the depression in the girl's heart. After playing for the whole afternoon, the little girl was so tired that she fell asleep on the grass. We could only smile bitterly and carry the girl back to the village. The old couple was still awake. They were cooling off at the door while waiting for them to come back. When they saw Wu Yejin appear with the little girl on her back, their wrinkled faces showed happy and kind smiles. At night, although there was only a hard mattress to sleep on, Wu Yi was sure that she would fall asleep very quickly. "Hey, are you okay?" The debatable genius who had recovered from the whole afternoon of facing the wall jumped to the wood she used as a pillow and asked, "What's the problem?" The girl asked in a daze. "Work, work, have you forgotten why we came to this era?" The parrot scratched the girl's hair with its claws. But the half-asleep girl swatted the parrot away as if she was swatting away a mosquito. "Don't worry, I'm fine now. I'll be able to work from tomorrow onwards." "I can't relax at all. You sound like an author with terminal procrastination disorder." The parrot flapped its wings and flew out of the fire pit. Fortunately, the fire in the pit had been extinguished. Otherwise, the black color on its body would not be just from being stained with soot, but from being burned. How do I put it? After seeing Grandpa and his family, I finally have a sense of what I want to do. Viola Cinnabar forced herself to open her sore eyes, and she looked up at the roof of the thatched hut with a gentle expression. If we fail, people like Grandpa and the others will also be affected. I want to save them, save our world. You're only realizing it now? Of course, I was brought to this era by you. I was killed by that hedgehog murderer before I was mentally prepared. I'm lucky that I didn't have a mental breakdown, so, from the very beginning— Moshi Moshi, are you still listening? Huff, huff, you're already asleep? Geez, from tomorrow onwards, you have to work harder. The parrot sighed helplessly. Then, like an ordinary bird, it snuggled up to the girl's head, tucked its head into its wing nest, and fell asleep as well. Parting line. Wake up. Come. Wake up. The five-leaf pansy was awakened by a violent shake. She opened her eyes and saw that it was the little girl who woke her up. The old woman sat by the side with a frown. Grandpa was nowhere to be seen. The girl rubbed her eyes and asked in a daze, "What's wrong?" "Miss, it's better for you to leave this place as soon as possible." The old woman forced a stiff smile. "Ebisu, don't do this kind of thing." The parrot was still talking in its sleep. Judging from the tone of its voice, it seemed that it was still dreaming. Wu Yi yawned and looked out the window. The sky was still dark. "What? It's still early in the morning. Big sister, run away." However, the little girl's serious expression made Wu Ye's sleepiness disappear. She vaguely felt that something was wrong with the atmosphere. "What's going on?" she asked. "Lord Mountain God is coming to collect the sacrifice." The little girl's expression was a little fearful and desolate, which made Quinquefolia's heart ache a little. If Big Sister doesn't run away quickly, she will definitely be chosen as a sacrifice by Lord Mountain God. Mountain deity? Sacrifice? Wu Yejin's brain could not wrap itself around the situation. Could it be that some places had an evil custom of sacrificing people? In the past, they would give us a lot of advance notice. I don't know why, but there's suddenly a signal for sacrifice today. The old woman added with a worried expression. Signal? What's that? Wu Yi was still puzzled. At that moment, she seemed to hear a rumbling sound in the distance. This is the signal. If we don't hand over the sacrifice— Before the old woman could finish, the old man rushed in with a panicked expression. "This is bad, old woman. Pack up and run. I don't know why the mountain deity is angry. It'll be too late if we don't run now." As soon as he finished speaking, a gust of wind blew the roof of the straw house and half of the house into the air. Then, the girl saw the true face of the mountain deity. She could see it even if it was thousands of meters away. There was no other reason other than the fact that it was too huge. It was a giant beast with 8 heads and 8 tails. If one were to use the mountain range as a reference, it would be even taller than the mountain range. The rumbling sound was only the sound of it crawling across the ground, crushing the towering trees and crushing the boulders into powder. It had 8 snake-like heads, each of which was larger than a truck. Its 16 eyes were blood red, and it was spitting out its scarlet tongue. The saliva that dripped from the corner of its mouth would cause white smoke to rise from the ground. Its 8 tails were stronger than steel. When it swung its tails from the foot of the mountain, a large piece of the mountain would be blown off by it. Just standing in front of such a terrifying giant beast made one lose all desire to run away. It's Yamada no Orochi. Damn it, Amaterasu Amikami didn't mention this at all. At this point, the parrot finally woke up. It cursed angrily, then suddenly flapped its wings. Its body, which was only slightly bigger than a chicken, instantly became a giant with a wingspan of more than 5 meters. Of course, for Yamada no Orochi, it was just the difference between a grain of sand and a grain of rice. The parrot's claws firmly grasped Wu Yejin's shoulder. Then, it flapped its wings and flew up with her. When facing Su Xinxing, the other party's sword was faster than the members of the Thunderbolt, so Bankai Tian didn't have time to stop it. But in this situation, it naturally couldn't sit back and watch Wu Yejin die here. Wait, what about the old man and the others? Wu Yi immediately came back to his senses and asked. It's better if you don't look down. The parrot was silent for a moment, then said in a deep voice. Not long after the appearance of Yamada no Orochi, the mountain flood broke out. Even if the people in the village started to run, they still couldn't outrun the mountain flood. The villagers who greeted the girl during the day were swept into the muddy yellow giant waves and died without a doubt. Wait, that little girl. Quintana lowered her head and saw the little girl lying on top of a cabinet. It was one of the few pieces of wooden furniture in the old man's house. She was soaking wet and shivering. Bankai Tian, can you take another person? That little girl's weight shouldn't be a problem. Wu Yejin asked loudly. I'll try. In this regard, the parrot could only try to do its best. Big sister? The little girl saw Wu Yejin and the others approaching her and couldn't help but reach out her hand. Don't be afraid, I'll take you away from here. We also reached out to the girl. However, just as they lowered their altitude and were about to rescue the little girl, a huge snake head poked out of the giant waves and swallowed the little girl and the cabinet at lightning speed. The parrot was startled and immediately flew up, increasing its altitude to more than 1 kilometer, barely entering the safe zone. Wei looked at the severed arm in her hand, and a sorrowful cry escaped from her throat. Even she didn't know what it meant. But why did this happen? The old man and the little girl. What did they do wrong? Why did this happen to them? After a while, the girl held the half-arm and burst into tears. The parrot sighed and said nothing. Yamada no Orochi was wreaking havoc below them, and there were no living people in a radius of several miles. Just as Bankai Tian was about to leave with Wu Yejin, the girl suddenly asked in a low voice. Hey, I remember you said at the beginning that the one who killed Yamada no Orochi was not the mythical Susanoo, but the visitor from another world who pretended to be Susanoo, right? Yes, that's right. Are you going to find him now to avenge the villagers? No, it's too late. I want to save them. But they're all dead. Don't be impulsive, you only have one chance to resurrect. Before the parrot could finish, the girl broke free from its claws and fell from a height of thousands of meters toward Yamada no Orochi. There was no fear on her face. She just clenched her fists and screamed at the top of her lungs. But before that, you despicable monster, eat my fist first. Chapter 113. Wu Yi poked her head out of the river and breathed in the fresh air, trying to calm her trembling body down. You said such cool words, but you didn't even touch a single scale of the enemy. You hit the cliff and died. The parrot flew in the air and looked at the girl. You're so long-winded. The most important thing is the momentum. Wu Yi said casually as she swam ashore and wrung her clothes dry. Little girl, sometimes you say some very masculine lines. Because I'm going to be the T, the strong one, and the other is the P. The parrot felt that it could no longer keep up with the young people. So it sighed and decided to change the topic. So, have you calmed down now? He should have calmed down by now. Wu Yejin looked at her hands with a bitter smile and found that the trembling had stopped. It was not because of death, but because of the uncontrollable fear of being stared at by the creature at the top of the food chain when facing Yamada no Orochi. I'm sorry for making you have such bad memories. The parrot was silent for a moment, then bowed its head and apologized to the girl. It's too late to apologize now. Viola Cordifolia, on the other hand, was much more open-minded. She put on the coat that was basically squeezed dry and took a deep breath. Let's go find that otherworldly visitor now. Parting line, please help us. Looking at the young girl who immediately sat down on the ground when she saw him and did her best to beg him for help, the young Su Xinxing's sword stopped midway. Even so, Su Xinxing did not let down his guard. As a brave warrior who had gone deep into dangerous places and fought countless ferocious monsters, more than half of the scars on his body were left by humans in the territory of the kingdom. Naturally, he knew that he could not trust anyone easily. What's more, before this, he was looking for the sixth sacred sword hidden by the Demon King's army cadres in the underground city of the Demon King's army. Although he had confirmed that he was not in an illusion and had fallen into another space through the destruction of the sacred sword, there was no way to change the idea of being in the enemy's camp for a while. Before that, can you give me back the parrot that you hung upside down on the tree? Wu Yejin looked up and asked carefully. Do you have a problem with my dinner? Su Xinxing frowned and asked loudly. No, it's my partner after all. The girl wanted to cry but had no tears. Although she had been mentally prepared that this guy would be difficult to communicate with, she did not expect that before they could communicate, the bird that was looking for him in the sky would be taken away. Partner. Su Xinxing turned his head, narrowed his eyes, and carefully examined the bird on the tree that he was about to pluck and barbecue in hot water. Oh, its original form is actually a human. This guy is lucky. I don't eat demi-human monsters. After a while, his face fell, and he took the unconscious parrot and threw it back to Wu Yejin. Then he waved his hand and said, Well, if there's nothing else, get out of here. Wait a minute, that's not what I meant by helping, the girl hurriedly said. Huh. Su Xinxing half opened his dead fish eyes, looking listless and impatient. In fact, there is a monster nearby that is endangering the lives of civilians. I hope you can help us get rid of it. Please. Saying that, the girl once again used the fierce tiger descends to the ground and pleaded with Su Xinxing. Before this, why were you so sure that I could defeat that monster? And why did you show a feeling of being afraid of me as soon as you appeared, as if you knew how strong I was? Su Xinxing narrowed his eyes and asked suspiciously. The cold sweat on Wu Yejin's forehead immediately flowed down. Not good. Even if she did not look up at Su Xinxing's expression, she could feel that something was wrong. If she did not answer well, she would probably be decapitated again. Because the nearby area has been badly damaged, and you are the only one here. To be able to do such a thing, you must be very strong. The girl tried to answer. But it was true. The area around Su Xinxing's current camp looked like it had just been ravaged by a tornado. It was a mess, and almost all the trees were broken into pieces. The thickest firewood was no thicker than a fist, and the longest was no more than a foot. Therefore, Su Xinxing did not make any more questioning sounds. This made the girl's heart, which had been in her throat, calm down. It seemed that she had passed. Then are you going to help? She asked carefully. Why should I help you? Su Xinxing snorted. He had met people who pretended to be pitiful and asked him to kill monsters. In the end, after killing the monsters, he found that the monsters were actually the guardians of the fairies, and the client who pretended to be pitiful was a liar hired by the fairies. Because of Su Xinxing's negligence, nearly 1,000 palm-sized fairies were captured by humans, and the fairy forest was burned to the ground. Countless fairies lost their homes and lost their homes. Therefore, he spent nearly 3 months traversing half of the continent, killing all the people who protected the gang, including the king of a certain kingdom. He recovered most of the fairies who had been sold and rebuilt their homes. After that, Su Shunxing had considerable doubts about such words. Based on your one-sided story? I'm telling you, it's too simple, too simple. After that, he ignored the girls begging, stood up and walked into the forest. Wait a minute. Wu Yejin hurriedly stood up and wanted to chase after him without even patting the dead leaves off her body. But Su Shunxing's sword flashed, and a sword mark was drawn on the ground between the two of them that traversed most of the forest. Don't follow me. If you cross this line, don't blame me for killing you. After coldly leaving a sentence, Su Shunxing sheathed his sword and gradually disappeared into the bushes under the gaze of the girl who was frozen in place by his murderous intent. What should we do now? The parrot, who had woken up and witnessed all this, asked the girl. What hero who killed Yamada no Orochi? He's completely a so-called cold-blooded, smelly, Chunibyu murderer. The girl who came back to her senses shouted angrily. Then, she calmed down and asked the parrot, in this case, we can only do it ourselves. I remember you said that if you transform into a magical girl, your physical fitness will become stronger, right? No. Even if you become dozens of times stronger, you won't be able to defeat Yamada no Orochi. The parrot quickly shook its wings and head, trying to dispel the girl's unrealistic idea. I don't want to fight force with force. Don't you remember how Susanoo killed Yamada no Orochi in the myth? You mean? The parrot touched its beak with its wings, and then its eyes lit up. Although it's worth a try, the success rate is not guaranteed. It's okay. Wu Yejin patted her cheeks to encourage herself, and then raised her right fist. Because justice will prevail. Chapter 114. In Japanese mythology, Susan, who was driven out of Takamagara, met an old couple when he was walking in the Fei River of the Izumo country. The old couple originally had 8 daughters. 7 of them had been eaten by monsters, leaving only the eldest daughter in Nataheim. And this last daughter was about to become a sacrifice to Orochi. Therefore, Susanoo offered to marry Kida Inada to him as a condition and volunteered to defeat Yamada no Orochi. But even Susanoo, who was brave and good at fighting, didn't dare to face Orochi head-on. He poured 80% of the wine brewed by the old couple into 8 huge wine cups. After the Yamada no Orochi was drunk, he waited patiently for the exhausted Yamada no Orochi to chop off its 8 heads and tails with the sword of Tatsuka. Only then did he kill the strongest demon in Fusang. Wu Yejin's intention was very simple. She wanted to imitate what Susanoo had done in the myth. She wanted to make Orochi drunk and subdue it in one breath. Will it really go smoothly? While pouring the turbid wine into the wooden tub used by ordinary people for bathing, the parrot kept questioning, this is just ordinary rice wine. In the myths, isn't the wine that made Orochi drunk called the 20% discount wine? Don't complain. Now that things have come to this, we can only do it, right? Wu Yejin struggled to lift the barrel and poured it into another bath barrel. We don't have time to distill the wine to increase the alcohol content. If the quality is not enough, we can only use quantity. Hurry up and pour more wine. In order to exchange a large amount of wine and other necessary things with the villagers, she handed over her jewelry, watch, and mobile phone that could still be used after falling into the water to the villagers. Even so, if it weren't for the kind old grandpa helping her, she was afraid that she would still lack a lot of necessities. After all, after loading the file, the girl and the old grandpa had no interaction. The old grandpa helped her out of kindness. This made Wu Yejin even more determined to save the old grandpa's family. Now Wu Yejin could be said to be penniless. In addition to her clothes, she only had a student handbook and a picture of Mizuki Takemiya. The preparation of the trap took some time, and by the time everything was ready, night had already fallen. After declining the old man's invitation, the girl and the parrot hid in the valley where Orochi would pass by, waiting for the other party to take the bait. The summer grass was very unbearable. Not only was it stuffy and itchy, but there were also many mosquitoes buzzing around her ears. The girl did not dare to use too much movement to drive these insects away. If she was discovered by Yamada no Orochi, it would not be a fun experience. Fortunately, there was another target in the grass for the mosquitoes to bite, which helped Wu Yejin take a lot of the firepower. Aw, damn bug. My back is so itchy, and I can't even scratch the wings of a bird. Why did I turn into such a creature? The parrot was rolling on the ground in pain. It didn't take long before it was on the verge of death. It had a look of, I'm almost a useless bird. This made the girl's mood much better. Indeed, there were many times when one's own happiness was built on the pain of others. After an indeterminate period of time, just as the five-leaf pansy was about to fall asleep, a strange noise sounded from afar. This woke her up immediately. She carefully shrank into the grass and stepped on the snoring parrot that was scratching its stomach with its wings. She tried her best to open her eyes wide and look in the direction of the sound. Not long after, a behemoth big enough to fill the valley appeared. The chill that rose from the bottom of her heart once again gripped the girl's heart, and she even felt a little breathless. I can't escape, I can't escape, I can't escape. However, because she had experienced it once before and was already prepared, Wu Yi quickly overcame this state. She gently exhaled and then focused on watching Orochi's movements. This made her notice that Orochi's abdomen was bright red. She didn't know if it was injured or if it had run over some creature that was stained with blood. Orochi did not notice the two insects hiding in the grass at all, even if it had 8 heads. However, the 8 wooden barrels in the middle of the road that exuded the aroma of wine attracted Orochi's attention. At first, Orochi's huge heads showed a puzzled look, but then its alcohol-loving personality made it abandon its doubts, and the 8 heads began to drink the wine separately. The girl in the grass began to feel her heart beat faster. She knew very well that she was not Susanoo. Even if Orochi was drunk, she might not be able to kill it. So, in fact, we had prepared several backup plans. The wine barrel was one of them. Previously, she found pufferfish in the river where she loaded, so she asked the parrot to catch a lot of them. As a god, although the debate genius could not use his divine power without restraint for some reason, catching fish was not a problem. Then, she took out the most poisonous organs of the pufferfish, such as the eyes and other organs, mashed them into a paste and smeared them on the wall of the wine barrel. The poison of pufferfish could be dissolved in water, and as long as it was not heated, it could be put in alcohol. Even if it could not kill Orochi, its poison was quite strong, and it could make it easier to move later. Is it really okay? The parrot asked in a low voice. You're a real man, a debater. Go and prepare for the next step. Take action when you see my signal. Wu Yejin swallowed her saliva and forced herself to be alert. The parrot seemed to want to say something, but in the end, it did not say anything. It just quietly flew to the top of the cliff. Sure enough, after drinking the 8 barrels of wine, Orochi looked a little dizzy. He kept shaking his head, and his movements seemed to be a lot slower. Unfortunately, there was no sign of poisoning. The next step was the second step of the plan. Wu Yejin took out the photo of Mizuki Takemiya that was clipped to the student handbook, closed her eyes, and whispered softly, "Please bless me, Sister Fagone." After a moment, she opened her eyes and put the photo close to her body. After doing all this, she gathered her courage and ran out of the grass where she was hiding. You monster, don't you want to eat girls? If you can catch me, come. After attracting Yamada no Orochi's attention by shouting, the girl ran forward with all her might. The serpent, whose reaction had become a little sluggish, hesitated for a moment, then urged its huge body to chase after Wu Yejin, who was just a small shrimp. Wu Yejin calculated the serpent's position. When the serpent was about to pass through the trap area, she waved her hands to the sky, sending a signal to the cliff. The next moment, there was a violent explosion on the side of the cliff. The collapsed rocks like a mudslide pressed down on the serpent directly below, forcibly burying the serpent's huge body under the mud and rocks. Black gunpowder, the formula was saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal. It was the cheapest thing, but it was also the most powerful thing that the girl could make. In fact, compared to the cheap wine, saltpeter, which was sold by traveling merchants, was the most expensive thing in this plan. Most of the things she carried with her were used to exchange for saltpeter. Even so, the power of the black gunpowder was still not satisfactory, and saltpeter was limited, so the amount that could be made was not large. In the end, the power of the explosion was increased to an acceptable range by mixing some divine power in it. Wu Yejin stopped and looked at the smoke that was gradually dispersing behind her. She found that there was no figure of Orochi in it, so she was a little relieved. Did it work? The parrot circled the sky and finally landed on the girl's shoulder. It asked excitedly, "Did we defeat Orochi?" Don't set up such an inauspicious flag at this time. After Wu Yejin confirmed that Orochi was under the mudslide, she joked with the parrot. The next moment, the earth shook. 8 huge serpent heads broke through the soil and rocks, and with choking smoke, drilled out of the ground. The serpent's eyes were blood red. "Do you think it's too late for us to apologize now?" The parrot asked with a stiff face. "I don't think that guy is the type to calmly listen to our apologies." The girl with cold sweat on her forehead answered with uncertainty. "I think so too." The parrot and the girl had the same view, which was rare. At the same time, Wu Yi clenched the thing that the parrot called the celestial jewel in her hand. In fact, it looked similar to the magical girl's wand. It was time to show her real strength. Chapter 115. Previously, Heavenly State's imperial concubine big sister. In the end, I still became a magical girl. Wu Yejin anyway. The description of the transformation process is too long, so I'll skip over it. Simply summarize it as clothes off, nude, dress, and stage appearance. Yamada no Orochi watched the whole process, so please refer to the 4 foreigners. After Wu Yejin used the heavenly jewel to transform, she found that she was not wearing a princess dress like other magical girls. Instead, she was wearing a witch dress with sleeves. The sleeves were not short sleeves but long sleeves. The main colors of white and red gave her a sense of holiness, and there were also patterns of red leaves and feathers, which further enhanced the delicate feeling. Although it was not obvious because it was covered by the hem, she was actually wearing white knee-high socks with rice grains embroidered with golden thread. Although her hairstyle hadn't changed much, there were 2 more ornaments that looked like embroidered balls on the back of her head. The long red ornaments that looked like coins hung down from the embroidered balls, making Wu Yi look like she had 2 more ponytails. Finally, the ornament that replaced the heavenly jewel on the girl's head was an imperial knot tied with a red string, which looked as cute as a princess's crown. The heavenly jewel, which originally looked like a magic wand, had now become a weapon that was longer than the girl's height, similar to a katana. Oh, I feel like I'm full of power. What power is this? Divine power? Magic power? Spiritual power? The girl looked at her new appearance and could not help but ask the parrot, "If I'm a magical girl, there must be a corresponding energy, right?" The parrot landed on the girl's head, pondered for a moment, and then answered with a serious face, "Yes, because the terrain here is higher than the horizon, so it should be the potential of gravity." It was really King scientific. So, Wu Yejin turned around and ran before the snake could react. What's the use of becoming a magical girl? With the parrot on her head, she ran away in tears. Fortunately, the parrot did not lie at first. After becoming a magical girl, Wu Yejin's physical fitness had indeed improved a lot, so much so that she felt like she was running at lightning speed. Even so, the distance between her and Yamada no Orochi was still shrinking. Just like the scimitar of ants, even if its speed far exceeded that of other ants, a single step from an ordinary person would take it a long time to crawl. If it were to race with a human, it would definitely lose. Don't tell me that as a magical girl, I don't have a sure kill skill or something like that. Wu Yejin also knew that the current situation was very bad. She could not help but ask the parrot in a panic, "If you have time, you can stop and perform a Kagura dance. I've never learned anything like that before. Then I'll chant a Shinto prayer, although the effect will be much weaker. Sorry, I haven't learned it either." Then, which of the imperial coin, rice rope, or shikigami do you use? Not a single one. It's better to say that you shouldn't have such high expectations for someone who was just an ordinary high school girl 2 days ago. So, the young people of this generation, what's with the size of an old man from the Showa period? No matter what, I have to lead it in another direction. At the very least, I can't implicate the village. As Wu Yi ran, he suddenly had an idea. Speaking of which, genius debate, can't you carry me and fly? Oh, you're right. Being chased by Yamada no Orochi almost made me forget that I'm a bird. The parrot spread its wings, and then with a violent wave, its whole body suddenly became bigger. Just like before, it wanted to grab the girl's shoulder and fly away with her. However, before they could leave, one of Yamada no Orochi's heads and the xenomorph's tongue shot towards them. Even though the parrot tried its best to turn sideways to avoid the xenomorph's bloody mouth, it was still knocked away. The girl and the bird bounced on the ground a few times like pebbles before coming to a stop. Genius debate fainted directly. Although Wu Yejin used the enlarged parrot as a cushion, she was still dizzy from the fall. As the white feathers around her fluttered, she could only watch as Yamada no Orochi approached them. But it seems that everything is over. Sure enough, changing history and saving the world was impossible for an ordinary person like her. This time, I won't be able to resurrect after I die, right? If it's possible, I really want to see Sister Fei Gong again. Perhaps because she had experienced death twice, the girl was unusually calm in the face of impending death this time. Unlike the previous 2 times, she didn't even have the leisure to think. This time, the girl even had the time to feel sorry for the unfulfilled wish in her heart. At this moment, an icy blue long sword fell from the sky and stabbed into the ground in front of Yamada no Orochi. The ground under Yamada no Orochi's body seemed to melt in an instant, turning into a sticky brown liquid that trapped the monster's huge body. Then, a figure appeared in front of the despairing girl. "It's you." Wu Yejin swallowed the words cold-blooded, smelly, Chunibu murderer that she almost blurted out. For the first time, she felt that the terrifying figure in armor was cute. "Why you here?" The figure waved his hand at the long sword that was stabbed into the ground not far away, and the sword flew back to his hand. Yamada no Orochi, which was still struggling in the liquid soil, was trapped in the solid ground in an instant. That, Su Shinshin pointed at the blood-red mass on Yamada no Orochi's abdomen, and then pointed at himself with his thumb. "I cut it. Do you have a problem with my dinner? Can't you eat something normal?" Although the girl wanted to complain, she could only obediently shake her head when she thought of the ruthless character of the other party. "Anyway, thank you for saving me." "Humph, I didn't do it to save you. It's just an ordinary hunt." Su Shinshin turned his head and said in a muffled voice so that the girl couldn't see his expression. "This guy is actually a tsundere." Wu Yejin felt as if she had discovered a new world. At this time, Yamada no Orochi finally broke free from the soil with its monstrous strength. Su Shinshin pulled out another golden long sword as if he had been granted amnesty and walked toward Yamada no Orochi. "Be careful, that guy is very fierce." Originally, Wu Yejin wanted to remind him of the horror of Yamada no Orochi, such as the ability to summon floods, the terrible venom, and bad breath, in its mouth, the indestructible scales, and the tail that was no weaker than its head. But before she could finish, Su Shinshin had already turned into a golden stream of light and cut off 5 heads of the other party. In front of him, Yamada no Orochi was just like a chicken. It had no power to fight back and could only be easily slaughtered. "What did you just say?" After cutting off several tails that swept over with his sword, Su Shinshin turned back and asked the girl. "No, nothing." Wu Yejin felt like a fool. "As long as you're happy, humph, this kind of small fish is super weak. It has no immortality and only needs to be killed once. Its recovery ability is low. After I cut off its head, it didn't grow a new one in 3 seconds. It has no resistance to drugs except for the need to enlarge it according to the proportion of its body. You made it like this with just a few barrels of wine. Except for the completely useless flood, it has almost no supernatural power. In the world I lived in before, it would only be a meat animal. Su Xinxing teased Yamada no Orochi while commenting on it. How dangerous was the world you lived in before? Wu Yejin continued to complain in her heart. Then she suddenly realized that something was wrong. How did you know that I just made it drunk with wine? This guy had been hiding in the dark and peeping from the beginning to the end. The girl couldn't help but shout in her heart. Su Xinxing immediately pretended to be deaf and focused on torturing the innocent Yamada no Orochi. The miserable situation even made the girl sympathize with the majestic Yamada no Orochi. Chapter 116. That's it. From now on, you don't have to worry about the threat of Orochi, mountain god anymore. After returning to the village, the girl showed the tongue she had cut out from Orochi's mouth to the villagers. The villagers couldn't help but be overjoyed. Only the old man who vaguely resembled a village chief could still maintain his calm. He looked at the impatient Su Xinxing behind the young girl and said, "Was Lord Mountain God treated by this lord? May I know your name?" "He is one of the legendary 3 noble sons, Kenso." Before Su Xinxing could say anything, the girl interrupted. Immediately, our main character had an expression that said, "Are you kidding me?" However, the old man didn't notice this. Instead he wondered, but isn't Kensu Ag, D-sama who has a beard and claws and lives in Takamagara? Because he angered Amaterasu Amikami in Takamajihara. His beard and fingernails were pulled out and he was expelled from Takamajihara. The girl continued to explain. So that's how it is. No matter what, the fact that you have cured the mountain god will never change. Please let us thank you properly. The old grandpa's tears flowed down his cheeks as he bowed to Su Xinxing while trembling. When my daughters were eaten by the mountain god, I had hoped for this day countless times. It's really great that you can come here. At least, my youngest daughter, Inadaheim, is still alive. You're welcome. Because he was too powerful, the young man who was rarely thanked by humans in the other world replied stiffly. Then, he shrunk back uncomfortably. Strange Inadaheim, why does it sound so familiar? Although Wu Yejin had played with the little girl for a long time before loading the last time, she had forgotten to ask for her name. Therefore, this was the first time she had heard the little girl's real name. Unfortunately, the parrot was still in a coma and had been placed outside the house by the two of them, and was being plucked by the naughty children in the village. They could not learn the origin of the name from the parrot, who was proficient in or had personally experienced myths. A moment later, the girl suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Can I interrupt for a moment?" She interrupted the old man, who was still thanking Su Xinxing, and asked him, "May I ask if your name is Ji Ming?" "Young miss, have you heard of this little old man's name?" "Yes, just a little." Wu Yejin's mouth twitched, and then she glanced at Su Xinxing who didn't know anything. This caused the latter to be confused. He did not understand what was going on with the girl's gaze, which seemed to say, "I didn't expect you to be the kind of person who wouldn't even let off a young girl." Dividing line. So, what's going on? After the banquet to celebrate the defeat of Orochi was finally over, Su Xinxing found Wu Yejin and asked her the reason. "Why do you want me to pretend to be Zophie?" Although I'm not too sure about the myths here, that should be the name of the Fusang god, right? It's the male name of Kensu? Sorry, I lied to you before. Anyway, I will tell you everything now. Please be patient and listen to me. Wu Yejin knew that it was not a good idea to keep hiding it, so she simply confessed everything. So Su Xinxing ran outside and caught the seemingly culprit, the parrot, who was still eating. "Send me back to my original world, now." He had one hand on the parrot's neck, and the other hand on the hilt of the golden sword. It seemed that he was about to draw the sword. I can't do it." The parrot struggled weakly. "You know it yourself, right? All the spells in this world are ineffective on you. I can't send you back to your original world." "Then, how did I go back to my original world?" Su Xinxing asked unwillingly. "It was the power of the 3 divine artifacts and the Amaterasu Amikami that opened the door to the other world and let you go back. Because of this, the 3 divine artifacts exhausted all their power and turned from the treasures of the gods into ordinary objects. Finally, they wandered into the human world and were collected by the royal family. That is to say, our goal now is the 3 divine artifacts and the guy called Amaterasu. Su Shenxing let go of his hand. Whether it is the 3 divine artifacts or the Amaterasu Amikami, they are all in Takamagara. Our goal is also to go to Takamagara. Since we have the same goal, it's okay to go together, right? The parrot, who had regained its freedom, desperately breathed in the sweet air and carefully suggested. I refuse. Su Shenxing simply rejected the parrot's proposal. I don't have the reason and need to go with you. No, I'm going to keep an eye on you. Viola Fiveleaf suddenly said. Watch me. Su Shenxing sneered. Are you serious? For a moment, the temperature in the room seemed to have dropped several degrees, and the parrot was already trembling. Yes, in the myth, Susanoo went to fight against Orochi in order to marry Kita no Hime. I will never let you harm such a young child. The girl said righteously. I am not a pervert who likes young girls. Su Shenxing, who was choked by the unexpected reason, even forgot to pretend to be cool. He blushed and defended himself. He had seen Kita no Hime at the banquet just now. She was indeed a very cute girl, but she was too young. Even a lullicon would feel guilty and not have the heart to hurt her. But you were hiding at the side and looking at my naked body. The girl immediately accused, it was when I was fighting against Yamada no Orochi. I didn't want to see it. That was the special effect of the strange transformation, okay? But because I am a female, it doesn't matter. Wait, I don't understand the cause and effect of this. Questions and answers are useless. In order to prevent you from doing something heartless, I must watch you from the side. The girl continued to say righteously. Su Shenxing was speechless for a long time, then he remembered that he had to continue to act cool. Humph, do whatever you want. So he returned to his previous cold expression and snorted. If you want to follow me, then come. But let me make one thing clear first. Even if you are in danger, I will not help you. After saying that, he turned around and walked out of the room. How should I put it? What a standard Sundra speech. Wu Yejin looked at his back and muttered silently in her heart. Could it be that this guy was unexpectedly a decent person? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.